What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another amazing Naruto story. What if Naruto loses his right eye and left arm in an attack by the villagers? If you enjoy, then please like, share and comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Konohagakure was considered the strongest of all of hidden villages of the elemental nations and had proved their strength throughout all three of great shinobi wars, and once again when the Yondaime Hokage had defeated the strongest of the Biju, the Kyuubi no Yuko. However, the truth of the matter was that no mortal could ever truly defeat any of the Biju, as they were beings made entirely of chakra that was given a will and a physical form. Kyuubi was the most powerful as the lord of all Biju, with an infinite supply of chakra and the power to create tsunamis and level entire mountains with but a flick of one of its tails, while also being known to be a being of fire as it was the main element it used whenever it appeared. The only way to defeat the Kyuubi was to summon the Shinigami and have the Kyuubi's soul and power sealed away into a living prison, which was coincidentally had to be a newborn child, since only a child before the age of 2 could survive the sealing process, since they had yet developed chakra coils. So as they got older, their chakra and that of the Kyuubis could merge together, creating coils that could handle power of the two successfully. The events behind the true reason of the Kyuubi's attack was unknown to many, since few had known that the mother of Naruto, Kushina Uzumaki, was the previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, much like her predecessor Mito Uzumaki had been during the time of the Shoden Hokage's reign. The two Uzumaki women had been able to survive the process of sealing, since Mito was in her 20s at the time of her sealing because of the unique capabilities granted to them by their Uzumaki Kekai Genkei, which granted the Uzumaki longevity, a higher physical endurance, larger chakra reserves, and in some cases the ability to regenerate body parts or even control their aging. Kushina had also developed a special ability with her Kekai Genkei, with the ability to create chakra chains which were used to keep the Kyuubi restrained while sealed away within her. However, when Kushina was giving birth to Naruto, the seal restraining Kyuubi had been weakened enough for the surprisingly alive Madara Uchiha to be able to break the seal and release Kyuubi before controlling the Biju in order to have it attack Konoha. It was only through the efforts of weakened Kushina and Naruto's father, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, that Kyuubi was released from Madara's control and seal it away into their newborn son at the cost of their lives, as they had to protect him when Kyuubi attacked Naruto while still under the control of the ancient Uchiha. The dying wish of the Yondaime Hokage was for the villagers of Konohagakure was to treat his son as its greatest hero for keeping the Kyuubi contained within his body so that it couldn't wreak any more destruction on the village. It was also his hope that those that he called friends would help train Naruto, even if they didn't know he was his son, to become a strong shinobi with the power of the strongest of the Biju to add to his strength. Sadly, his blind faith in his fellow man to do the right was an utterly foolish dream, as while they praised him for his deed, they went out of their way to disregard his last wish. Upon his reinstatement as Hokage, the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi had decided to announce Naruto's status as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yuko so that they would know the face of the one who would grow up as their greatest protector. It was not to be, as the villagers, civilian and shinobi alike, quickly called for the execution of the Namikaze, Uzumaki heir, despite the assurances of the Sandaime that they were completely safe from the Biju that had just terrorized their village. They refused to see Naruto as a child that was given the unwilling burden of being the prison of the Kyuubi, but as the very Biju itself, stripped of its power and given a human form by the actions of the Yondaime Hokage. Hiruzen was angered as well as saddened that his villagers were so caught up in their anger and feelings of loss that they would call for the death of a newborn child while thinking that they were doing a righteous act. Even his shinobi that were taught at least the basics of Fuinjutsu should have been able to tell that Naruto was just like a sealing scroll, with him being the scroll and the Kyuubi being the kunai that was sealed with him, but more than enough were also calling for Naruto's death. With Hiruzen being informed of the Fuinjutsu used in the sealing of the Kyuubi no Yuko, he was aware that since each of the seals were in fact given to Minato by Kushina, as they were from her former home of Uzushiogakure, and that the power of the seals were dependent of the life force as well as the will of the container to keep the Biju sealed. With the ignorance of his villagers, if they succeeded in killing Naruto, then the seals would break and release the Kyuubi right in the center of the village, where it would continue its destructive path and take even more lives this time, since he wouldn't possess the knowledge to perform the sealing, and the only other person who could perform the sealing was Jiraiya. the Gama Sennin, but he had already left the village along with Tsunade and her apprentice, Shizune. In their desire to kill Naruto, the villagers were actually threatening to come at him in order to get at the child, with Hiruzen believed that he would have had to harm some of his villagers in order to protect Naruto if not for the timely appearance of his Anbu squads led by Inu, Kakashi, Neko, Yugo, and Tora, Tenzo. Inu had already activated his Reikuri, Lightning Blade, while the remaining Anbu had already drawn their tantos and katanas in the defense of the Sandaime and Naruto, since Inu knew of Naruto's connection to Minato and Kushina and wouldn't allow any harm to befall the last connection to his deceased sensei, while the remaining Anbu trusted in the work of the Yondaime and would protect the legacy he left behind. Once the villagers had departed back to their homes, Hiruzen had called a meeting of the advisory, shinobi, and civilian council to discuss what was to be done with Naruto, and once again had to listen to the civilians and even some of the minor clans of Konoha calling for his death. After silencing all of the protests by flooding the room with his killing intent, Hiruzen made a law that anyone that informed the younger generation of Naruto's burden as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi would be executed, and further enforced it by claiming that any that attempted to harm Naruto would be imprisoned and even executed if any fatal harm befell him. It was his hope that instilling these laws would protect Naruto and give him a chance to grow up normally with friends amongst his generation, but he had a feeling his hope would not come to light. Once that was established, he was debating what to do with Naruto, with Shibi Aburame, Shuza Akamichi, Hiyashi Hyuga, Sume Inuzuka, Shikaku Nara, and Inoichi Yamanaka offering to take Naruto, adopt Naruto into their clans and raise him to be a fine shinobi in honor of Minato's sacrifice. However, the advisory council, the civilian council, the minor clans, and Fugaku Uchiha were against the adoption, and Hiruzen couldn't adopt him into the Sarutobi clan since it would cause even more problems. It was decided that Naruto would be placed in an orphanage under his mother's surname of Uzumaki, even if the council didn't realize that he was Kushina's son, since he told them it was decided by Jiraiya and Tsunade before they left, merely to honor Kushina until he was old enough to attend the Konoha Shinobi Academy and later become a shinobi for the village. Despite his intent for Naruto to have a normal life, since the orphanage was run by civilians and with the hate of the village was so strong, Naruto would suffer for the first 6 years until a pact was made with the proverbial devil. 6 years later, Konohagakure had recovered from the aftermath of the attack by the Kyuubi and continued to prove their dominance as the strongest of all the hidden villages of the elemental nations. Hiruzen Sarutobi was still Hokage and ran the village quite effectively as he waited for the time when he could step down once again after a successor was found, but none was available, and his only two viable options were roaming around the elemental nations, with Jiraiya maintaining his spy network to keep the village informed of threats to its safety, and Tsunade having left the village after the pain of losing her brother, Nawaki, her lover, Dan, and her prized former apprentice, Kushina, had become too much for the slug Sannin to bear. He had a few problems over the years that tested the patience of the elderly Kage and put a strain on his bonds with his family, such as his son Asuma growing distant with him after being punished for his handling of a mission before going to join the 12 Guardians of Fire alongside his brother Tsune, and the constant attempts on the life Naruto Uzumaki. He had placed Naruto in the orphanage as planned, but for the first 4 years of his life the young Uzumaki suffered from neglection from the staff and was often starved, with the other children being praised for picking on him, with him being punished whenever he stated that it wasn't his fault. It was only through the actions of Kakashi that this information was brought to his attention after the Inu masked Anbu had paid his sensei's son a visit, only to find Naruto being beaten after a group of children had picked a fight with him, then being praised for it. Needless to say, the caretaker was given a swift execution when Kakashi's tanto pierced his heart from behind before Kakashi used Shunshin to take the boy to the hospital for his injuries, where he had to threaten the staff after they refused to treat him and leave him under the protection of his squad and Yugos before reporting his findings to Hiruzen. The Sarutobi clan head was furious at the treatment of the child he had come to acknowledge as his surrogate grandson, since every time the elderly Kage visited him his bright personality allowed him to forget that he was leader of the village was simply an old man, since Naruto always called him Gigi. That day almost the entire orphanage staff was executed, with the exception of a few who actually helped Naruto, even though they were alienated by their peers and replaced with more level-headed individuals. After Naruto had awakened, Hiruzen had visited the boy, and it broke his heart to see how much fear had grown in the boy when Hiruzen had told him he would be going back, so he decided against that action. He decided against his better judgment that he was going to remove Naruto from the orphanage and give Naruto his own apartment, but Kakashi, who happened to be in the room at the moment, since once word got out about it the villagers would just raid his apartment to get to him. Hiruzen realized what Kakashi said was true, and though he wanted to have Enbu squads like Kakashi's, Tenzo's, and Yugo's protect Naruto at all times, he couldn't, since he needed them to handle the S-rank missions that Konoha received, since they were among the best of his Anbu forces. In an attempt to spare Naruto the hate of the villagers, Kakashi removed his mask and announced that he would resign from Anbu Black Ops and make it his duty to watch after his sensei's son, since he considered himself his godbrother if the Sandaime would allow him. At first Hiruzen denied Kakashi the chance, stating that he was still too young to watch over a child and that his skills were much needed as an Anbu officer, but Kakashi was quick to argue against him. Kakashi reasoned that he knew that despite the Sandaime's hopes that the village would get over their hate for Naruto being the Kyuubi's prison, that wouldn't occur too well in the future when Naruto was truly able to show that he was himself and not the kitsune, and he already speculated that when he joined the academy in 2 years that many would try to sabotage him, make him a pathetic excuse of a ninja if he was lucky enough to graduate. Kakashi explained that unlike the Sandaime that spent much of his time in his office handling the affairs of the village, he was able to walk amongst the populace to hear what they thought of Naruto and how even the shinobi thought very little of their resident Jinchuriki, with plans to harm him always being made if he was ever caught, such as during the Kyuubi festival that occurred every year on his birthday. If Kakashi was allowed to raise him, then he would be able to teach him things that Minato had taught him while he was the command of the former Kage, and give Naruto a solid basis on his path to becoming a great shinobi. Hiruzen saw that Kakashi did have really good points about what he could do for Naruto, but in the end he still had faith in his villagers and decided that Naruto would be given his own apartment with Enbu guard and given a monthly stipend that came from the funds from when the treasury of Uzushiogakure was transferred to Konoha after its destruction by Mito for use by Kushina and herself. Kakashi was angry that Hiruzen denied him the chance to raise Naruto away from the hate of the villagers, but kept his emotions in check as he once again donned his mask and excused himself before leaving the office via Shunshin. Hiruzen once again thought he was making the correct decision, but once again he failed to realize how far the villagers would go to get rid of Naruto while fueled by their hate for the Kyuubi. Naruto was ecstatic when Hiruzen gave him an apartment of his own, even though it was quite illogical to give a 4-year-old child his own place to live and expect him to be able to live effectively. The young blonde quickly found out how hard it was to be once the villagers learned that Naruto was no longer confined to the orphanage and roamed their streets, mocking them with his presence by their opinions. Shop owners sold Naruto old and nearly rotted food and clothing at 3 times the regular price, with the only clothing he could obtain was a bright orange tracksuit with blue trimmings and the spiral of Uzushiogakure on the back and shoulders, in addition to the several sets of white t-shirts with the spiral of Uzushiogakure on it and blue shorts that he received from the Sandaime Hokage. Whenever he tried to play with any children his age, parents would pull their child away or run him off before instructing them to not associate with Naruto, as he was a terrible child that would hurt them if he was allowed to get near them, forcing the boy to be isolated from those of his generation as well as the older one. His only source of food became ramen after the Sandaime had taken him to Ichiraku's ramen stand to eat with him whenever he visited the child, since the owner Tuchi and his 8-year-old daughter Ayame were among the few civilians that didn't hate Naruto for his burden and allowed Naruto to eat at their establishment whenever he wanted. Hiruzen was quick to recognize that Naruto tended to hide his pain behind a mask of false happiness and blamed himself for not doing more to help Naruto out, but he still believed that things would become better for Naruto as he got older and the villagers began to let go of their hate. However, in 2 years he would come to realize that his inaction in doing what was truly best for Naruto may end up sealing the fate of Konoha and its people. It was October 10th and the day of the Kyuubi festival, and also the 6th birthday of one Naruto Uzumaki, and the boy was currently running for his life from an angry mob comprised of drunken civilians and a few shinobi. The day had started out well for the young Uzumaki, with his Gigi giving him a birthday present in the form of 6 all-you-can-eat ramen coupons from Ichiraku Ramen and a pair of green goggles that he said were on his doorstep when he arrived, meaning they were from someone else, although Hiruzen knew that they were from the Hyuga heiress, Hinata, but wouldn't tell the boy of the girl's crush on him. He also informed Naruto that he had signed him up to join the Shinobi Academy and that he would be attending next week when it started, along with the heirs and heiresses of many of the shinobi and civilian clans of Konoha. Naturally, Naruto was excited that he would finally get the chance to learn to become a ninja after begging Hiruzen to attend for the last year and a half after seeing the ninja of the village go about the village performing acts that simply amazed Naruto and proclaiming to the aged Kage that once he graduated he would take his seat and become the youngest Hokage in the history of Konohagakure. Hiruzen laughed at his proclamation and told Naruto that if he wanted to reach his goal then, he would have to learn everything that was taught in the academy and become a strong shinobi when he graduated before he could think about giving the Hokage seat to him. Naruto promised him that he would, and after the two left Ichiraku, Naruto returned to his apartment while the Hokage returned to his office, since he knew to stay inside on his birthday unless he was with the Hokage or the Inu, Neko, or Tora masked Anbu when in public. He had really wanted to attend the festival ever since he learned of when he turned 3, but when the head matron at the orphanage had let him outside the orphanage he had been chased and beaten by the villagers before he had rescued by Yugo's squad and taken to the hospital, where he had to remain for 2 days to recover from his injuries. Even when he had received his apartment he was attacked on this day as well, and wondered why the Anbu that were supposed to protect him were never around to stop it, not knowing that the Hokage had actually assigned Kakashi's, Tenzo's, or Yugo's squad to watch him, since the 12 members were the only ones that held no animosity against Naruto and made sure he was never harmed on their watch. However, the council members that hated Naruto always made sure these 3 squads was always assigned missions outside of the village a few days before his birthday, and they would only return after October 10th to find Naruto confined to the hospital. Since all Anbu missions were handed out by the head of the Anbu Black Ops Division, who didn't seem to have a grudge against Naruto, Hiruzen couldn't rule it as more than a coincidence, not knowing that the council was bribing the commander, but made sure that any Anbu that was assigned was punished with imprisonment if Naruto was harmed. Luckily, the Anbu always made sure that Naruto wasn't too seriously harmed, but did allow the mobs to rough him up a bit before they intervened and broke up the mob with a few threats to cause them harm. However, this year would turn out differently and would have a huge impact on Naruto's life, as well as granting him a power that would ensure his place in history as powerful shinobi, the likes of the legendary Sannin, Tsukumo Hitaki, and the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto was running as fast as his legs could carry him as he tried to stay ahead of the angry members of the mob that was calling for his blood. As usual, he could hear the cries of, "Get the demon brat," and, "We'll finish what the Yondaime started," demon, making the boy cry as he could hear the anger and hate in their words. He had always asked Gigi why they called him such names, but the Sandaime said that they just couldn't see Naruto for who he really was, but they would eventually someday. "They always call me a demon and claim that I killed their loved ones, but I'm only 6 years old, so how could I have killed anybody before and not remember?" Gigi said that "I'm not a demon like they say, but if I'm not a demon then, why do they do this to me every year? So many of the villagers always look at me with those cold eyes, talking about me, and beating me on my birthday, and I don't know why. I'm only an orphan and I don't even know who my parents were or what kind of people they were when they were alive, since Gigi won't tell me anything except that they were well-respected people before they died. If that's the case then, I don't understand why the villagers would hate me if my parents were good people unless they suddenly became traitors and were killed because of it," Naruto thought as he continued to run away from the mob. Despite his lack of an education, Naruto was quite smart for his age, since the Hokage or the Anbu that guarded him would teach him things whenever they visited Naruto, with him learning how to read and write and a few social etiquettes so that he wasn't completely socially inept. However, none could ever tell him about his parents or why the villagers seemed to hate him, stating that Naruto wasn't old enough to know such things just yet. It wasn't only the knowledge that they would tell him when he got older that allowed him to continue trusting those that he had come to consider his only friends in the village. Taking a quick glance behind him, he saw that the crowd had gotten larger as more people realized what was going on, and now he could see shinobi amongst the crowd that had originally been all civilian. He had already given up waiting for the Anbu to rescue him, since they only seemed to arrive after the crowd had beaten him for a while. He was determined to get away this year by leaving the village and hiding in the forest outside its walls till the next day. He was ducking into an alley that he could come across as he made his way closer to the north gate that was the closet to him at the moment, while running as hard as he could. He knew he could run for a good bit since Inu had once said that he had plenty of stamina for a kid his age, but he had been running for almost 30 minutes and the constant dodging and weaving had begun to take its toll on the young blonde, but he was determined to get away. Cutting the corner of a building, he could finally see the large open gates leading to the forest and began to pump his legs even more while subconsciously channeling chakra into his limbs to increase his speed. The shinobi in the crowd realized that if they didn't do something quickly, the Kyuubi brat would get away from them, since the Chunin that guard the north gate were sympathetic to Naruto's burden and wouldn't allow them to continue chasing him. With a quick hand sign, several shinobi vanished in a puff of smoke, signifying the use of shunshin, before reappearing in Naruto's path, causing the boy to come to a stop and look around in panic for a way out. Spotting a nearby alley, he ran into and prayed that it didn't end in a dead end, but unfortunately it did, and Naruto could find no other way out of the alley as he could already hear the mob coming in behind him, and quickly turned around while pressing his back to the wall while taking a stance to defend himself that surprised many in the crowd but didn't deter them. "Why are you doing this when I haven't done anything to you?" Naruto asked, fear evident in his voice. "Oh, is the little demon afraid? Well, that's good, since I want you to feel the same fear you caused when you attacked and killed my sister and brother 6 years ago." A civilian male sneered as he approached with metal pipe in hand. "How could I have hurt anyone 6 years ago when I was just a baby?" Naruto asked, afraid and confused. "I don't need to explain anything to you, demon brat. All you need to know is that we're doing the village a favor by removing your evil taint and will be praised as villagers once we get rid of you. The Hokage made a grave mistake when he decided to let you live among us, polluting the purity of our village with your evil." A male Chunin replied while brandishing 2 kunais. "Yeah, we're going to done what he should have done and finish what the Yondaime started by killing you and sending you back to hell where you belong, demon." Another female Junin yelled. Naruto was confused even more when he heard this and wanted to know what she meant, but before he could voice his question, a kunai was launched from the crowd and buried deeply in his left shoulder. The young blonde cried out in pain, and this was the unspoken signal for the mob to descend upon him and began exacting their rightful vengeance upon his being. Naruto tried to curl into a ball to protect his small frame as he tried to weather the blows that were raining down on him, but he was suddenly yanked to his feet before being lifted and pressed against the wall with his arms spread wide. A blood-curdling scream was heard from his lips when 2 of the shinobi suddenly pinned him to the wall by stabbing their tantos straight through his arms, leaving him to hang helplessly as pain exploded in his arms. For what seemed like hours, the mob continued to beat the boy as he waned in and out of consciousness while hoping that his assault would end soon. "Why?" was Naruto's anguished, pain-filled thoughts. "Die, you filthy demon brat!" a civilian woman yelled as she swung her pipe down onto his small form. "Why do I have to suffer like this?" His thoughts continued to surface. "You took away everything from me and I will have my revenge." A female Chunin screamed as she stabbed him with a kunai before twisting it and savagely ripping it out. "I know I never did anything to do them, so why are they doing this?" Naruto thought while praying for an answer, but none was forthcoming. "I hope you rot in hell with all of the other demon filth." Another civilian male yelled as he struck. "Is this how everything going to end for me?" Naruto thought right before he unleashed another pain-filled scream as a male Junin suddenly stabbed Naruto in his right eye with his kunai. "I take your eye so that when you get to hell you'll remember how foolish for you to attack our home and think you could get away with it." He sneered at the boy. Some were shocked at the brutality, since they did have some reservations for attacking the boy, but their anger quickly wiped away any feelings of guilt, and the more bloodthirsty continued to beat on the boy. Another shinobi decided to give him another reminder as he stepped forward with others parting way for him as he drew his katana from the sheath across his back. "I'll make sure that you feel as much pain as possible before we send you to hell, and I'll finally avenge the loss of my wife and daughter, demon," the man proclaimed as he lifted his blade high above his head. By some miracle, Naruto was able to open his left eye and look up at the man that now stood before him, causing many to flinch at the look of pain and grief that was shown in his remaining eye. Many took steps back, cause at that very moment they could only see a tortured child and not the Kyuubi no Yuko in human form. Any chance of stopping the man from striking the child became for naught as the blade flashed through the night before it tore into the tender flesh of Naruto's body. As it separated his left arm from his body, caused the boy to scream again as even more pressure was placed on his right arm. The pain was too much for the boy, having a kunai embedded in his eye and now having his left arm removed from his body, with his scream causing many in the crowd to flinch at the sound and look away before he finally passed out from it all. Drip, 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 drip. The steady dropping of water was the sound that Naruto heard as his consciousness returned to him, as he found himself floating atop of it and groaned as he opened his eyes to see a dark ceiling above him before grunting as he sat up to see where he was at. It took a few seconds to realize that he was looking through both eyes and immediately reached for his left arm with his right to assure himself that it was still there, but he was confused since he was sure that his right eye had been stabbed and his left arm had been sliced off, but now he was completely whole and wondered how that had happened. It's almost like they never hurt me, but they still seemed to have dumped me in a sewer by the looks of it. Naruto thought as he climbed to his feet to stand, and what he realized was only ankle-deep water. He looked around the sewer and noticed that the walls with 3 different sets of pipes that seemed to run parallel with each other, with the largest giving off a red glow, the second in size giving off a blue glow, while the smallest gave off a purplish-white glow. As Naruto wondered what they were for, he was suddenly aware of the sound of heavy breathing coming from behind him and whirled around in fright, believing one of the villagers had snuck up behind him with the intent to harm him again. Instead, he found himself staring at a massive pair of golden gates with a small piece of paper on it with the kanji for seal on it in the very center of it. Curious, he walked closer to gate, wanting to know what was causing the breathing that he was hearing, when a giant pair of crimson eyes with black slits appeared in the darkness, causing him to jump back in fright before a chuckling sound was heard. The darkness of the cage was suddenly illuminated by a red glow, as the face of a large fox could now be seen resting on its massive paws as the kitsune gazed at the being before him. The mouth of the large fox spread to reveal massive teeth, as a rumbling chuckle could be heard. So my container finally appears before me after 6 years, and thanks to the ignorance of the humans of this village when he is in mortal danger. Who are you and where am I? Naruto asked, fearfully. The ignorance and stupidity of the humans once again astounds me to no end, as they really believe that by harming you they can harm me. They don't even have the sense to even let you know that you are my container and teach you how to wield my chakra, making you into a strong shinobi. The giant kitsune rumbled, seemingly ignoring Naruto's question. Hey, I don't know who you are, you stupid fox, but it's rude to ignore people when they ask you a question. Naruto yelled. The giant kitsune chuckled again. You have no idea who I am, and yet you have quickly quelled your fear enough to make demands of me. You amuse me greatly, kid, and it is because of that fact I will tell you who I am. The inside of the cage was illuminated further to reveal the entire body of the large kitsune with 9 tails flowing behind its body. I am the Kyuubi no Yuko, and you are my container, or in the words of you humans, Jinchuriki, or human sacrifice. And we are what is called your mindscape, which is a mental representation of the seal that binds me to your soul. I have been sealed within you for the last 6 years, and I have become appalled by what I have seen from within this seal. Naruto found himself becoming even angrier. What do you mean that you are the Kyuubi? I thought the Yondaime killed you 6 years ago, and what do you mean that you are sealed inside of me? Are you the reason that everyone is calling me a demon and always hurting me on my birthday? Kyuubi scoffed. I will admit that I am partly to blame for the misfortune that has plagued you for the last 6 years after my defeat, but most of the blame can be placed on the villagers. They are the ones that can't see past their anger and hate for my actions that day to realize that you and I are not the same, and that you are merely my container and not some misconceived idea that you are me stripped of my power and turned into some weak, pathetic human. The Yondaime was unable to kill me, since no human can truly defeat a Biju, since we are merely a mass of chakra and will that have gained a corporeal form that allows us to come into contact with our physical surroundings. The only way that we can be defeated is to be sealed within a person or object, depending on how many tails we possess. With me being the strongest, I can only be sealed into either a human with specially enhanced body or into a newborn child whose chakra coils that have yet to form. That is where you come in, as the Yondaime chose you to become my prison by summoning Shinigami-sama and using the Shiki Fujin in combination with the Hake no Fuin Shiki to seal me and stop my rampage against the village. Kyuubi frowned as she paused for a moment. After my defeat, I was still aware of what was happening outside of the seal and knew that he had asked that the villagers treat you as a hero for containing me. They chose to ignore his dying wish, and as I watched from the seal I could hear them crying for your execution, and I grew disgusted with how quickly we're to come to a decision of to kill you. If not for the Hokage, most of the clan heads, and those Anbu that protect you most of the time, you wouldn't have survived for more than a few hours. They are the only ones other than the Yondaime Hokage that I respect in this pathetic village, and they are lucky I am confined by this seal, or I would finish what I started for the simple reason of removing their taint from this world. Naruto looked down in confusion as he said in a small voice. I don't understand everything you said, but if what you said is true, then I finally know why everyone hates me and always try to hurt me. However, I don't understand that if everyone says such great things about the Yondaime, then why didn't they do like he asked and treat me like a hero? Don't they realize that if I was really you, then I wouldn't have allowed them to hurt me in the first place and would have hurt them instead, or even go as far as finishing what you started 6 years ago? You are indeed more intelligent than one would assume for such a young kid, but I reason that it because you were forced to mature faster than normal because of the harsh hand that fate has dealt you. The humans of this village are so caught in their feelings of loss that they can't see the truth and choose to lash out at you in an attempt to gain an outlet for all the feelings that they are unable to cope with or overcome. They fail to realize that this seal is powered by your will to survive, and if you died I would simply return to Makai before returning in 10 years, since a Biju must remain there 1 year for each of tail plus 1 more year for their body to be reformed. Kyuubi flashed an evil grin. Also, I could be free of this seal. If you were to decide to release me, I could easily return to the real world and destroy them for the crimes they have committed against you. However, that is not why you have been brought before me, and I will tell you why you are really here. As I mentioned before, I am able to see what goes on outside of the seal, since it allows me to connect to your senses and experience what you do, and I am quite aware of what has become of you in the past few minutes. You needn't worry about time in here, since the mind works faster than the body does, so you could be in here for hours and only a few minutes would have passed in the outside world. Kyuubi said. Naruto gripped his arm in response. Yeah, I remember them beating me up before. One of the ninjas stabbed me in my right eye and another one cut my left arm off, but I have both, so I thought it was just a dream. Are you saying that I really don't have a right eye or left arm anymore, even though I can feel both of them right now as I'm talking to you? Kyuubi nodded. That is exactly what I am telling you, kid, since whenever you appear in your mindscape you will always appear unharmed despite your physical condition, since your mind always retains the image of your body in its healthiest form. Since you have been here only a few seconds have passed in the outside world, and I have decided to grace you with an act of kindness that is unbecoming of me. Normally, I could use my chakra to regenerate any wound that is inflicted upon me, and that ability has passed on to you to an extent due to my sealing, since all Jinchuriki gain certain abilities that they contain. The ones that you have received from me are your enhanced healing and larger than normal chakra reserves, as well as a few other things that I will reveal to you later. However, due to the nature of the seal, I am unable to regenerate your arm or eye, so I have a way of giving you a compensation for this. I am able to give you back your arm and eye, but they will be of a demonic nature, and I will also give you a bloodline as well that I will help you learn to use. Naruto looked up at the large kitsune. I don't mean to sound unappreciative or anything, but I want to know why you're willing to do this for me? I mean, you're supposed to be a demon, so I doubt you would really care what happens to a human like me, since you said it yourself that if I died you could come back in 10 years while I would remain there for all eternity. I just don't understand why you would want to help me, considering that would mean that you would be sealed inside of me longer as long as I'm alive, so I want to know why? Kyuubi grinned. The reason why is because I believe that you are a being that I come to respect if you are given the proper chance to grow and become strong, but that can't happen if I allow you to die at such a young age. I have watched you struggle for the last 6 years, but you have never lost your will to live, and your desire to prove to everyone that you won't back down is an admirable quality as well. This is why I'm willing to do this for you, because I want to see you become strong, even if it means that I must stay sealed within you longer, but I will not allow you to remain a weak excuse for a shinobi. In addition to give you these gifts, I will also train you in the shinobi arts that I have learned over the years, and since you are the Jinchuriki of the strongest Biju, I shall make you the most powerful shinobi that has ever walked the elemental nations. Naruto allowed a small grin to appear on his face. You happen to be a giant fox, and even though I can see that have thumbs unlike a normal fox, I think you can show how to teach me how to do hand signs or teach me how to fight when you're like that. The Kyuubi's grin widened even more before its entire body was engulfed in a red glow as the tails of chakra wrapped around its form before it began to shrink in size until it began to resemble a vaguely human-sized shape. Naruto watched with rapt fascination as he watched the phenomena before him, and it was a few more moments before the glow receded to reveal the new form that Kyuubi had assumed. In the place of the giant kitsune, a young woman appearing to be in her early 20s now stood before Naruto as she grinned at the slack-jawed expression the young Uzumaki before walking closer to the bars of her cage so that he could view her better. She had long red hair that was tied into two braids starting at her lower neck and extended down to her waist, with fairly tanned skin and crimson eyes with black slits for pupils. A pair of fangs stuck out from her lower lips as a half-smile played across her lips. She was dressed in a tight short-sleeved crimson top with a black trim around the edges that revealed her abdomen as well as revealed a lot of cleavage of her with fishnet armor underneath. She also wore a loose crimson skirt with a pair of tight black shorts underneath as well as a pair of black high-heeled shinobi sandals with metal shin guards as well. She stopped in front the bars and watched the expression on the face of her container with an amused expression on her face. "So, do you still think that I am unable to teach you anything about how to be a shinobi?" The now human-sized Kyuubi asked, amused. Naruto pointed at her as he took a step back. "What the heck, you're a freakin' girl. What's with the deep evil male-sounding voice when you were a giant fox, and how am I to know that this isn't some sort of trick?" Kyuubi frowned for a moment. "I'm not surprised by your actions, since everyone always assumed that since I'm the strongest of the Biju that I'm a male, since my voice is quite masculine when I'm in my Biju form. All of the Biju are able to assume a human form since this is how we have been able to interact with humans over the centuries, or did you not realize that the only time a Biju was seen was when we wanted to be seen in our normal form? After all, it would be hard to move around without some pesky human trying to attack me if I was always a 20-story tall kitsune, wouldn't you think?" Naruto blushed as he hadn't thought of that. "So, what's going to happen now?" Kyuubi smiled. "Now you are going to step inside of this cage with me, since I need to be within physical contact with you in order to impart my gifts upon you, since I can't leave this seal. Don't worry, I won't harm you or anything, since those miserable humans have already done more than enough of that. I need you to trust me a bit if I'm going to uphold my end of the bargain and train you to become strong." Naruto was still wary of her since throughout history kitsune were known to be trickster, but he really wanted the gifts that she was offering, and something in his gut was telling him that he could trust her. Forcing down his nervous fear, he made his way inside of the bars that represented the seal until he was standing before the kitsune woman, who was still smiling at him. He was shocked when she suddenly knelt down to his level to embrace him and quickly stiffened, since most physical contact he had with others usually ended with him being hurt, but she only whispered a few assurance into his ear until he had calmed down. Pulling back slightly, she smiled down at the young blonde in her embrace before her expression became serious. "I will need you to brace yourself, since what I am about to do is basically rewrite your genetic makeup so that I can make these changes, so you will be in pain, but it will only last for a moment or two," Kyuubi said. Naruto was immediately afraid, but the gentle embrace of Kyuubi and the assurance of her words quickly washed away any negative emotion, and he nodded to her. Kyuubi smiled once again before leaning down to capture his lips with hers as her fangs pierced his lips as a shroud of crimson chakra enveloped both of them. Naruto realized that she was correct when she said it would be painful, as it felt like fire was running throughout every cell of his body, causing an unbearable agony, with the most prominent source being his left arm and right eye. In an attempt to distract his mind from the pain, he wrapped his arms around her larger frame as he focused on the sensation of her lips pressed against his as he experienced his first kiss. Kyuubi chuckled as she picked up this thought as her chakra continued to work on his body while removing any impurities that it found while conditioning his body to its peak performance. It was only a few seconds later that the chakra faded away as Kyuubi ended the kiss while breaking the embrace, as Naruto stumbled away while gasping for air, with only a few more seconds before the pain faded as well. "Now, I want you to return to the outside world and show those ignorant ants why they should mess with the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yuko," Kyuubi said with a dark grin. Her grin was quickly matched by Naruto, since he could now feel the immense power that was now coursing through his veins, and without a word his mental representation vanished from his mind with plans to do as Kyuubi asked. The wall to the left of Kyuubi began to reveal an image as her chakra surrounded her for a moment before taking the form of a simple throne, as she was eager to see what her container would do. As Kyuubi had said, only a few seconds had passed in the outside world while he had been in conversation with the Queen of the Biju and receiving his gifts. After Naruto had passed out from losing his arm, they had plucked the kunai from his remaining arm, allowing him to collapse in a heap. Two shinobi stepped forward and flashed through hand signs in preparation for a Kaiden jutsu to destroy his body, but paused when he was suddenly enveloped in a shroud of crimson chakra. The crowd was shocked and thought that the demon was suddenly breaking free of its human form despite their belief that it was powerless. The malicious presence created by the chakra caused many of them to break out in a cold sweat, as this was the same feeling of hate and anger they felt 6 years ago when Kyuubi first appeared outside of the village. They were even more shocked when the body of Naruto Uzumaki jerked a few times before slowly made his way back to his feet, using his remaining arm to push himself up before standing before the now frightened crowd. Watching with morbid fascination as the chakra-covered child reached up with his right arm to pull kunai from his right eye before tossing it aside before chakra began to take form in his right eye socket, while it also formed an arm of solid chakra from the stump of his left arm. Suddenly, the chakra deepened until it was a dark crimson that completely blocked Naruto from their view, causing the shinobi that was present to pull out kunai and whatever weapon they possessed in order to protect themselves from whatever was inside of that dark orb. A moment later, the chakra slowly faded in color to reveal Naruto, and everyone present gasped when they saw what had become of the boy they had just tried to kill a few moments ago. Naruto stood before them with all of his wounds healed from their earlier assault on his being, with the exception his arm and eye were no longer described as human and was now demonic in nature. His right eye was normal looking except for the fact that it now had a black sclera with a crimson vertically slitted pupil with 3 rings surrounding the pupil with 3 inverted pupils on each ring for a total of 9, which slowly rotated around the pupil in a counterclockwise fashion. His arm had taken some truly drastic changes as well, with the arm now a mass of red flesh that resembled human skin. His hand ended in wicked claws with a bone-like protrusion of flesh that extended back from the end of every second knuckle by 1/4 of an inch. From his elbow was also a bone protrusion with a metallic shine tie that extended back to halfway up his upper arm, with the rest being able to be seen underneath his flesh all the way up to his wrist. His mind was suddenly flooded with knowledge of what his new gifts were capable, and he was more than happy to give them a trial run on the mob before him. With a heavy breath, the small child flexed his new demonic arm as his gaze shifted to it as he tested its responsiveness to his mental commands before a dark grin appeared on his face as he looked back up at the crowd. "You guys tried to kill me, but unfortunately for you, Kyuubi isn't ready to be set free just yet and has given me the power to get a little bit of vengeance on you for trying to do so. It's a shame she didn't want to do this herself, since I'm sure she would love to wipe this village away for all of your acts of aggression against me, but since she has given me the opportunity, I will gladly take it," Naruto said, darkly. "Don't try to talk so tough, demon, since we have you outnumbered and we took you down once already. Don't think that just because you obtained a little bit of power back means that you're going to be able to get out of here alive," one civilian yelled from the rear of the crowd. "You talk big considering that you're at the back of the crowd, knowing that I would have to go through everyone else to get to you, while you use that to your advantage to run away. However, it is just as Kyuubi said, with how ignorant you villagers are about the true purpose of a Jinchuriki like myself, so let me educate you idiots a little bit before you meet your end and get acquainted with Shinigami-sama. The Kyuubi is actually the queen of the 9 Biju, making her a girl, and since I am a guy, that means we are not the same, or how guys believed that I am the Kyuubi reincarnated is quite false. Also, because of the design of the Shiki Fujin and Hake no Fuin Shiki that the Yondaime used to seal her within in me, in the event of my death she would have been released back into the world to continue what she started 6 years ago, or if my will to live wasn't strong enough, then the seal would also break, resulting her being free also. So all of your attempts to kill me would have resulted in your deaths at her hands, but fortunately for you I'm not ready to kick the bucket just yet, but rest assured that your deaths are guaranteed, but by my hands instead of hers," Naruto said with his voice filled with dark mirth. "You're just lying to use with the hope that we won't kill you, Kyuubi brat. The Yondaime gave his life so that he could seal you away into this human body so that it would be easier for us to kill you," the shinobi that took his arm proclaimed as he brandished his katana. "My blade has already tasted your flesh once already, and I will make sure it does again as I cut you down into tiny little pieces." Naruto lifted his demonic arm up. "Sorry, but that isn't going to happen because I'm going to kill you instead as payback for what you did. From now on you're all going to learn that when you attack me I'm going to hit back twice as hard." Suddenly, a curved blade made of metallic bone sprouted from his forearm to that extended about 6 inches out from its widest part at his elbow and 2 inches out from where it connected at his wrist. The triangular tomes and rings in his right eye began to spin slightly faster before the boy took a step forward and suddenly vanished from their sight. They looked around in panic before a scream came from the center of the mob. Several people were suddenly split in half with no sign of their assailant as many quickly tried to get out of the alley. However, as those lucky enough to get close enough to exit from the alley, they were suddenly interrupted a strange zapping sound before a bright light appeared before them. "Rakery," was the voice a civilian heard before a hand covered in lightning pierced his chest and exploded out of his back. Kakashi and his Anbu squad along with Tenzo's and Yugo as well as the Sandaime Hokage himself dressed in his battle garb stood at the entrance of the alley with even more shinobi lining the rooftop that surrounded it. Kakashi pushed the now dead man off of his hand as he glared at the crowd through the eyeholes of his Anbu mask while the remaining members of Naruto's primary protectors had drawn their blades as well. The killing intent that permeated the air caused many to fall to their knees in fear, with the Sandaime himself seeming to be releasing an ungodly amount as he glared at the assembled mob before him. "All of you have dared to break my law in regards to Naruto Uzumaki and have attempted to end his life. As I decreed 6 years ago, anyone that attempts to kill him will be executed without mercy. I have given all of you fair warning, but you have seen fit to try my patience, and as of this moment your lives are forfeit, and may Kami have mercy on your souls, for I shall not." Hiruzen bellowed. Many cried out in protest while proclaiming that they should be treated as heroes for doing what he was seemingly incapable of doing by ridding the village of the Kyuubi's taint. Hiruzen grew even angrier at the arrogance of the people before him as Kakashi's rakery flared back to life and made to order his shinobi to execute the lawbreakers when Naruto's sounded from the other end of the mob. "Wow, I'm still amazed that you think you're so self-righteous even after my little explanation of the difference between me and Kyuubi-chan, but you're still as arrogant as before even though he said you're already dead. So since he has already acknowledged your execution, I will gladly carry out that order," Naruto said once again in his original spot with his forearm blade free of any blood. Many stared at the boy in shock for a moment at the cold tone of his voice before a large number of them decided that if they were going to die by the order of the Hokage, then they would take the Kyuubi brat down as well, causing Naruto to smirk as he lifted his blade arm again. Once again he took a step forward and vanished before suddenly appearing behind the group that had charged him with blood on his blade before it was seemingly burned away when the blade gained a purplish-white glow. "Jinten! Muasho!" Naruto intoned before the group behind him suddenly split in half at the waist. "Swift release! Shadowless flight!" The eyes of the Sandaime Hokage and the rest of those that had come to Naruto's aid widened in shock once they caught sight of Naruto and what he had done. Hiruzen was even more shocked by the fact that Naruto was able to kill them so effortlessly, in addition to his use of Jinten, which he had only heard legends of, as well as his new appearance. He feared that the Kyuubi had been able to somehow overcome the seal and take over Naruto's body so that it could kill those was trying to kill it, and was ready to take the possessed body of his surrogate grandson if necessary to ensure the safety of his village. He knew that since Tenzo contained DNA from Hashirama Senju after his former student had experiment on him was capable of using Mokuton, he would be able to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra for a bit, allowing him to grant the boy a quick end and free him from his torment of being possessed by the Kyuubi. Naruto seemed to notice the tenseness of his Jiji as well as the Anbu, since many were itching to draw their weapons to strike him down if he proved hostile, but he kinda figured they were wary of him after seeing him kill so many people in that brief moment, so he flashed the elderly Kage his trademark foxy grin. "How are you doing, Jiji? Sorry I had to do that, but you did say that if they broke your law about the Kyuubi and harmed me they had to die, so I decided to give you a hand. If you're worried about Kyuubi-chan taking over my body, then don't be, and I can explain the new eye and arm if you want me to," Naruto said. Sarutobi sighed. "I'm guessing that because of this attack that you learned of the Kyuubi being sealed inside of you." At Naruto's nod he sighed again. "I want the rest of this filth taken away to Anbu headquarters where they are to be held until their public execution. I will use them as an example to any that believe that they can usurp my authority, and maybe then they will get the message." Naruto snorted. "I highly doubt that, Jiji, but I'm more than to help get the point across. As of this moment I'm no longer going to allow the villagers to attack me, and if they do I will cut them down, no questions asked." I really wished that it didn't come to this, Naruto, but I hope you don't just start killing people at random because of this. Sarutobi said. I'll only kill them if they don't heed my warnings and persist on trying to kill me. I'm not completely without mercy, so I will give them a chance to remain alive, but if they don't want to live, then who am I to deny them a quick death? Naruto said as the blade retracted back into his forearm. Very well, come with me to office and we will see if we can come to some sort of agreement on what should happen with you from now on. Hiruzen said. Naruto nodded and walked forward as the Anbu quickly moved to detain the members of the crowd so they wouldn't die at Naruto's hands before they shunshined away with their captives. Once he was standing before Hiruzen, Kakashi, Tenzo, Yugo, and the others. Kakashi placed his hand on the boy's shoulder before they all vanished via Shunshin back to the Hokage Tower, where a conversation that would decide Naruto's path would take place. Hiruzen Sarutobi appeared within his office first, with Kakashi escorting Naruto along with Tenzo, Yugo, and their Anbu squads appearing soon after. With a single motion of his hand, the remaining Anbu took up stations around and outside of his office to keep watch, leaving only their squad captains with the Hokage and the transformed blonde. The elderly Kage quickly activated the privacy seals that were placed in the office, having been installed by Minato to ensure that no one outside of the office could listen in any important matters that didn't need to reach the public knowledge. Hiruzen could see that Naruto was currently on guard and realized that the attack by the villagers may have destroyed whatever bonds he and the others present in the room had with the blonde because of their misconceptions of the young Uzumaki. He took a moment to look over Naruto's new form and had to admit that even though he was only a child, he did strike a rather imposing figure. His left arm was the first thing that would draw anyone's attention, since the red flesh and various bone-like protrusions on his hand and forearm was a vast contrast to the rest of his small body, while his mismatched eyes would stand out as well, while the eye also seemed to have an hypnotic effect if one stared at the slowly revolving rings for a set amount of time. He was suddenly drawn from his silent observation when Naruto suddenly spoke with his voice laced with mirth. I wouldn't suggest staring into my eye for too long if I were you, Gigi. Naruto said with an amused expression. Sorry about that, but I was just taking in your new appearance. Could you please tell me what happened to you after I left you earlier, and what is the reason for your body is the reason is the way it is? Sarutobi asked. Well, after you left I went back to my apartment and locked the door like you always tell me to do, and was just messing around my apartment as I celebrated my birthday by myself. Eventually, I got bored and thought that I should go to bed earlier than I usually did, and that was what I did, but I was startled away when I heard my door being banged on. I panicked and quickly climbed out of my window and used the pipe next to it to shimmy down to the ground and took off running when I heard people shouting at me. I was sticking to the alleys so that I could stay as far from the festival as possible, but all of the noise that the people chasing me caused me people to join them, including some shinobi from what I could see whenever I looked behind me. I decided to run to the gates since I knew that Izumo and Katetsu were on duty and that whenever a mob chased me they would stop them, but when I was almost to the gates some shinobi appeared in front of me, forcing me to duck into a nearby alley. Naruto grimaced as he recalled the events that followed. It was my rotten luck that it turned out to be a dead end, and I was trapped while they kept calling me a demon and saying they would finish what the Yondaime started. They started beating on me to the point that I had pretty much about to pass out, but they wouldn't let me when two of the ninjas picked me up and pinned me to wall when they stabbed a sword like the Anbu carry in each arm to hold me up. They continued to beat on me for a bit more when another shinobi took a kunai and stabbed me in the eye, then another one took his sword and sliced my arm off, causing me to black out from the pain. I suddenly found myself in some sort of sewer and thought they had thrown me there to get rid of my body, but I was confused since I still had my arm and eye. I saw the sewer had 3 different type of pipes, with the biggest ones glowing red, the second size glowing blue, and the smallest ones glowing purplish white, but I didn't get to wonder about them when I suddenly heard breathing and followed the sound until I came to a giant set of gates with a piece of paper on it. A small smile graced his features. That was when I met Kyubi-chan, and she explained to me who she was, why I was there, and made the offer to give me back my eye and arm, which after a bitter hesitation on my part one accepted. After that I woke back up and was engulfed in red chakra, which gave me back my eye and arm before basically told the mob that I was going to kill them for trying to kill me, and they attacked, so I defended myself. I had only just started using my new gifts when you and the others appeared, and you know what happened from there. Naruto said, then frowned. I just want to know when you were going to let me know that Kyuubi-chan was stuck inside of my gut in the first place, or if you were ever planning to. He had purposely mentioned Kyuubi and added the Chan to her name to see how everyone would react to his suddenly close relationship with his inner Biju. He became even more amused when he saw how his Gigi tense at the mention of Kyuubi and knew that Kakashi, Tenzo, and Yugo as well as the hidden Anbu had did so as well. It was funny to him since they had never thought it would have been smart to inform him of the fact that he was a Jinchuriki in the first place, and he wondered if they ever planned on telling him or letting him remain ignorant to the fact. Now that they knew he had knowledge of his burden, he could easily tell that they were prepared to take him down if it seemed like she was going to escape or take control of his body. He was going to enjoy guilt-tripping the old cage a bit for always lying to him whenever he asked why people treated him so harshly before but would never tell him. He knew that it was being a bit petty, but for the hell he had to endure for the last couple of years, he felt that he had the right to be a bit petty if he wanted to. I'm sorry for not telling you for your burden, but certain circumstances for me to handle things differently from how I originally wanted to. Once I retook the Hokage seat after the sealing, I did as the Yondaime had asked of me and proclaimed you as a hero to the village for containing the Kyuubi and preventing it from destroying the village with the belief that they would accept you. I was unprepared for the backlash of that decision, since at the time they were still recovering from the loss of their loved ones and they were instantly calling for your execution, believing that the Yondaime had simply turned Kyuubi into an infant so that they could kill it. It was because of this that I placed a law stating that no one was to tell you or your generation and those that followed of your burden, and that any harm that befell you would be punished. But even with the threat of death, their hate for Kyuubi was too strong and they continued to treat you as if you were the Kyuubi instead. I could understand the hate of the civilians, but I had at least hoped that my own shinobi would have realized the difference between a kunai and its holster, but once again I found my hope shattered. With so many calling for you blood, I was fortunate to have Inu, Neko, Tora, and their squads having enough faith in the Yondaime's skill to come to your protection, and that was why I had them watch over you. I wanted to allow you to grow up with as a normal child with the chance to make friends with those of around your age, but even though parents couldn't tell their children of your burden, they still made sure their children wouldn't interact with you. This was why you were forced to be isolated from your peers, with only people like the Ichirakus able to see you for the child that you really are instead of the demon. Sarutobi said. Yeah, I've kinda heard a good bit of that from Kyuubi-chan, since she's been able to see and hear what goes on outside of the seal ever since she was first stuck in my gut, so I can't really blame you for having faith in the villagers to do the right thing. You're the Hokage after all, so what kinda leader would you expect to be if you didn't try to see the good in the people that you have sworn to protect? I just want to know whether you were ever planning on telling me about Kyuubi-chan, or were you going to let me remain ignorant until something else bad happened that would have caused me to meet her? Also, she says that if you don't stop referring to her as an it, there will be consequences, and let me warn, I'm only 6 years old, so I'm really impressionable right now, and I don't think you want me to pick up on the ways she's talking about torturing you for being a. She really hates how everyone seems to automatically assume that just because she is the strongest of the Biju that she's supposed to be a guy and that women can't be viewed as strong as well. Naruto said with a strange look on his face. He listened to her rants. Sarutobi winced at that. Tell her that I apologize for my misconception of her gender, and since you were able to tell me that so quickly, I can assume that she is also able to speak to you in addition to being able to see and hear what you do. Does she plan on taking over or trying to escape so that she can continue trying to destroy the village for imprisoning her? Naruto shook his head. No, she has already assured me that she doesn't have any plans to do anything like that, since if she wanted to escape, all she had to do is let me die, which would have sent both us to hell, or Makai as she calls it. I would have been stuck down there while she would have just returned in 10 years, since when a Biju dies when contained, they must remain in Makai 1 year for each of their tails, plus an additional year for their body to reform before coming back. She already said that she gave me this new arm and eyes because I have certain qualities that she finds admirable and wants to see how strong I can become if given the chance to actually grow. I realize that even though she's supposed to be a demon, she really doesn't seem to be all that evil. That is similar to what Mito-sama and Kushina said about the Kyuubi when they were its Jinchuriki, and stated that although she only seemed to appear when there was an abundance of hate and malice in an area that wasn't the source of her power. I'm just shocked that they neither of them ever mentioned that Kyuubi was female, but I also understand that neither of them ever really interacted with Kyuubi, so they probably wouldn't have known. Sarutobi thought. I will admit that despite your assurances that she won't attempt anything, you will have to understand that I am still a bit wary of her since she did attack the village 6 years ago with the intent to destroy it. I'm quite sure that the Yondaime probably took precautions so that nothing like that can happen, but if the seal allowed her to give you a new arm and eye, there is no telling what else it would allow her to do," Sarutobi said. Naruto seemed to space out for a moment before focusing back on the Sandaime. Kyuubi-chan says that she understands that after her actions on that night would cause some mistrust, but that isn't a concern to her. Her only priority right now is to make sure that I become strong so that if I ever face any of the other Jinchuriki that I don't have my butt handed to me, which would be an embarrassment to her since she's sealed inside me. Sarutobi nodded. I would assume that she would consider that an embarrassment since technically you are representing her, but I don't want you to become involving in some little Biju feud because of her pride to be known as the strongest. If necessary, I will have my student return to make adjustments to the seal so that she is unable to influence you at all if it means that you remain out of harm's way. Naruto was silent for another moment before sighing as he closed his eyes. Kyuubi-chan says this is why the Biju all look down upon humans in the first place, since they are so quick to judge them as evil even when they are showing kindness. She says just because we humans possess the ability to seal away a Biju inside of a human to create a Jinchuriki, many have grown arrogant in their belief that they can overcome any adversity. If she had really wanted to destroy our village, then, she says she could have used an attack known as Bijudama, tailed beast ball. Or as she has come to call it, Amari, menacing ball. That would have been more than enough to wipe Konoha off the map if she was in her right mind. The transformed blonde shook his head. I'm starting to see why Kyuubi-chan is always seeing humans as ignorant, because all we seem to do is think of ourselves as the superior race compared to beings like her. If it wasn't for the fact that she seemed to make me smarter when she was working on repairing my body, I probably wouldn't be able to understand half what she's ranting about right now. Sarutobi grimaced. I'm not trying to offend her in any fashion, but I must think of the safety of my village as well, and if she is to pose any sort of threat to you or the villagers, I am willing to take precautions to prevent such an event from taking place. Yeah, I've already figured that since I could tell back in the alley that you and the others were ready to attack me if you thought that I was under her control, even if it meant my life in the process. She says that due to the nature of the seal, that if I was temporarily incapacitated, that she could take over my body to protect me until I regained consciousness so that I could defend myself again. Now if that would have been the case when I was attacked earlier, then she would have killed you and everyone else, since she says that despite the fact she is sealed inside me, she is still powerful enough to protect my body from harm with the amount of her power my body is safely able to channel at the moment. Naruto said, then opened his eyes when he felt everyone tense at his words. I'm going to have to ask you to stop pissing her off, Gigi, since you're not the one having to deal with the headaches that it causes when she yells about how stupid we pathetic flea-ridden hairless monkeys are. Despite what you and everyone else seems to think so far, it only seems she has a genuine interest in making sure that I'm protected and properly taught. That's why she has given me a new arm and eye in the first place. I haven't really had too many people that really care about me as Naruto Uzumaki, and even if she is only doing it to defend her reputation as the strongest Biju, I'm still grateful for her concern even if she is a demon. It is not my fault that no one can let go of their feelings of loss and move on with their lives, but instead they choose to make me the village pariah and treat me worse than a traitor, but she sees me as a person, and for that I am truly grateful. Sarutobi sighed heavily. I am afraid that I've been caught up in the events of the past as well, and for a moment began to regard you as the villagers have been constantly doing, and for day I am sorry, Naruto-kun. I will also try to be more trusting of Kyuubi-san as well, as long as she seems to be helping you with good intentions, then I will allow your relationship with her to progress. Kakashi spoke up for the first time. Are you sure that is wise, Hokage-sama? The Kyuubi is a demon, as well as being a kitsune, and legends have always portrayed them as tricksters and masters of illusions. Perhaps this is merely a ruse to get Naruto-kun to trust her enough to the point that she could manipulate him into do whatever she wanted him to do, since he will be loyal to her. We can't be completely sure that whatever she did to him hasn't already instilled a sense of loyalty to him, and if she is allowed to continue, she may be just so he can eventually turn against us. Various murmurs of agreement sounded from the rest of the gathered Anbu, and Hiruzen had to sigh once again as he noticed the glare on the face of the 6-year-old blonde that was being directed at the Inu-masked Anbu. Naruto was about to defend the Kyuubi once again when her tantalizing voice once again drew his attention as she made a request of him. Naruto-kun, allow me to take over for a moment so that I can explain to these ignorant ninja what my plans for your future are. Kyuubi requested. Naruto nodded and everyone's attention was drawn to him when the boy was surrounded by a red outline for a moment as the whisker marks on his cheeks thickened as his eyes became red with slits for pupils. The glow resided after a few seconds before Naruto was engulfed in smoke before it faded to reveal the human form of the Kyuubi no Yuko that Naruto had witnessed earlier in his mindscape. Every male in the room was shocked by the beauty of the woman that now stood in Naruto's place and were drooling at the sight, while the female Anbu found couldn't help but become jealous of the red-haired beauty. However, the shock quickly faded as they realized what had occurred, with many reaching for their weapons when the woman spoke in a beautifully tantalizing voice that was soothing to their ears. I would suggest that you remove your hands from your weapons and relax for the time being. I really don't want to harm the ones that I know have seen to the safety of my vessel to the best of their abilities, but if you attack me I will kill you even if Naruto-kun hates me afterwards, since I will not allow any more harm to befall him at the hands of anyone in this village. Kyuubi said as she narrowed her eyes at the gathered ninja. Hiruzen realized that she was indeed a threat, as did everyone else in the room, as they could feel her power at the moment, and even with it heavily restrained by the Shikifujin, it was still close to the level of a cage. The elderly Cage could already tell that if she were to suddenly attack, that only he would be able to stand up to her for a short time before he would eventually fall, since he could also sense more raw power that was still being suppressed. Everyone, stand down. I believe Kyuubi-san has decided to grace us with her presence since she wishes to speak, and I don't want any signs of hostilities on our part or her own for the moment. Sarutobi ordered. The assembled ninja were hesitant to do as ordered, but a quick blast of killing intent to get his point across, and all of the Anbu had holstered their weapons, though they continued to remain on guard. Kyuubi smiled at this before returning her gaze back to Hiruzen, who was glaring at the human kitsune, causing her smile to widen even more as if to taunt him, and it took all of his restraint not to respond to the obvious bait. I want to assume that Naruto-kun has allowed this to happen, so I would like to know what is it that you want? Sarutobi asked. Kyuubi nodded. I merely wished to make my intentions for Naruto-kun clear without having to rely on him to relay my messages. I can't hold this form for very long since it will become harmful to the kid after a while, so I will be brief. I can tell you wanted to know what I have done to Naruto-kun other than the obvious, and I will explain that as well as what other things I have planned for him. Sarutobi nodded as he retrieved his pipe and lit it, since he had a feeling it would be of use in a moment. You may proceed. Kyuubi grinned. You are lucky that the kid considers you important, since I am not fond of being ordered around by a human, and don't think that the threat of sealing me off from him will work against me either, since I will still help him indirectly if need be. However, I am not here to get into some silly argument, so I will get straight to the point of why I am doing this. Quite simply, I have improved Naruto-kun's body to the most optimal performance that is required for a shinobi, with some of his senses such as smell being enhanced as well to be on par with my own. I had to recondition his body due to the fact that since the only source of food he was able to eat was ramen, so he is rather undersized for a child of his age. He is now faster, stronger, better reflexes, and even smarter since I imparted some basic knowledge upon him so that he isn't completely socially inept as he was before. You have already seen one of the abilities of the new arm that I have given him in the form of the bone-like metal blade that I was able to create by combining the iron in his body with his bone structure to form it. Before you comment, the blade is separate from his original bone structure, and more is created through the use of chakra to make it longer as well as sharper. Also, the bone-like protrusions on his hands are actually smaller blades that can be lengthened into blade claws through the application of chakra in that area. The arm is far more resilient to damage since the flesh of his arm is of similar endurance of the blade, which is more than capable of slicing through most weapons, though I will have him test the endurance of his arm once I begin his training. Kyuubi paused as she allowed all of those gathered to absorb what she had told them so far. Her piercing crimson gaze caught the various expressions that flittered across the face of the Sandaime and could tell that he was thinking of how much stronger Naruto would be. She could also tell that he was thinking of how to make sure Naruto's abilities would remain in the village, and this caused her to mentally grin, knowing she would deal with that later. After another few seconds, Kyuubi spoke again, regaining their attention. The eye is capable of countering one of the main weaknesses of many Jinchuriki, which is genjutsu, due to their large chakra reserves, which if untrained is next to impossible to control, but his new eye has an ingrained ability to neutralize most genjutsu that is placed upon him. The eye, which is actually a dujutsu that I created but have yet to give a name for, since it is actually the combination of the Hyuga's Byakugan and the Uchiha's Sharingan, since I was able to analyze both over the years, since I've encountered a few over the years when I was unsealed. The Dujutsu also has the added ability of using the second level of the Sharingan known as the Mangekyo Sharingan. However, I had to remove a certain flaw of this advanced level that caused a loss of sight with prolonged use of the techniques that it granted the user. In a way, you can say that I am overpowering the kit, but I decided that if I was going to improve him, then why not take it to the extreme level? This by no means will make him invincible, since I am quite aware that with any form of power there will eventually be a way to either neutralize it or counter it. Also, the abilities of the eye will place a heavy mental strain as well as being chakra draining, since I couldn't make the two different dujutsu completely compatible with him, since it is only around 80% ingrained with his DNA, which will allow it to be passed on to his offspring with the same weakness unless he mates with someone whose blood is able to counter the weakness of his new dujutsu. I have also given him an additional Kekai Genkei that is known as Jinten, which gives the user high-speed movement that is superior to the Shunshin that many use, since it doesn't really have a lag time in some instances when it is used. I acquired the DNA for this particular Kekai Genkei when I fought against a user of it about a century or so ago and kept the knowledge of it for some reason and decided to put it to use in Naruto-kun. Hiruzen and the others could only gape at the Kyuubi as they realized the ramifications of what she had just told them of what she had done to Naruto. The feat of combining the ability of the Byakugan, which allowed the user to see through objects, view the tenketsu of the human body, and granted almost perfect 360-degree vision with the Sharingan's ability to copy Gen, Nin, and Taijutsu with a mere glance, with the additive ability of precognition and hypnotic suggestions, made for quite a terrifying dujutsu that many would love to get their hands on. He already knew that Fugaku would call for the death of Naruto, while he was still unsure as to how Hiashi would react to learning that Naruto was capable of replicating the abilities of their clan's dujutsu that made the Hyuga and the Uchiha famous over the years. Add in the ability of his new arm, Jinten, and his abilities as a Jinchuriki, and Naruto was quite a force to be reckoned with. Sarutobi took a puff of his pipe before speaking. I have to admit that you did take it to the extreme when you decided to make your improvements of Naruto-kun, and I can't say that I am surprised, since I have heard of other Jinchuriki being granted abilities by their Biju. One such example being a previous Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Shukaku being able to use Satetsu, Iron Sand, Kekai Genkei that was exclusive to the Sandaime Case Cage, in addition to a mastery over sand and possibly food and jutsu. I am guessing that you will be able to train him in ninja arts as well, since you mentioned that you will be training him. Yes, I will be able to train him in your human arts, since I have been around for quite some time and I have taken the form you see before you out of boredom a few times over the centuries and learned about your ways of using chakra. Although, I can already make a guess that you would like one of your own to help train him as well, so that you have an idea as to how he develops, am I correct? Kyuubi said. Sarutobi nodded. Yes, I would like to make sure Naruto-kun is taught the ideals that all Konoha ninja are taught, and that his training is supervised whenever he is not training with you, since due to his recent changes he won't be able to attend the academy without having been labeled as an outcast by his peers and the instructors. If any of the villagers were to see Naruto in his current form, then they will believe that the seal has broken and you have taken over his body. Kyuubi smiled as she made a dismissive wave. You needn't worry about such a minor detail, since I already have that covered, since I don't need your ignorant villagers calling for the kid's blood, even if it means that he would have to cut them down if they attacked him. He has also received the gift of Kitsune illusions from me, which are in fact true transformations unlike the simple henge that you use, and he could easily hide his new gifts by changing his form as he sees fit, but it will require his concentration to do so, but I am able to do so for him until it becomes second nature to him. You seem to have thought up a plan for any uncertainties that may occur, and I can see that you are genuine in your willingness to help Naruto-kun grow strong. Sarutobi said, then turned his gaze to Kakashi. Kakashi, I am doing what I should have done from the beginning when you asked to watch over Naruto and allow you to resign from the Anbu to become his legal guardian until he graduates from the academy and becomes a genin. If required, you may become his Junin sensei, since you are the only one outside of the Uchiha clan that possesses a Sharingan, and will help with teaching him how to use it if he requires further instruction after he graduates. Kakashi nodded. Thank you, and I will train him to the best of my abilities, Hokage-sama. That will be very convenient since until I teach Naruto-kun a specific Oni-jutsu that will allow him to mold a body for me that I can place my soul into, I will only able to train him in his mindscape. I will teach him this jutsu once he has reached level of proficiency with my training and that of Kakashi-san, where I will take him to the next level. With him having to attend academy as well as receive training from the two of us, he will be one of your stronger genin with few that will possibly be able to match him. Kyuubi said. Sarutobi nodded once again before addressing his ninja. No one is to breath a word of what was said in this office tonight or they will be punished. The knowledge of Naruto's new Kekkai Genkei is an S-rank secret of the Uzumaki clan and cannot be released to the public without my consent or Naruto-kun's. Is that understood? A chorus of "Hi" was his answer. Very well, you are all dismissed. All of the assembled ninja vanished in puffs of smoke, signifying the use of Shunshin, leaving Hiruzen alone with the crimson-haired beauty. Hiruzen was about to ask if there was anything else she wanted to discuss with him when she suddenly glared at him, catching him off guard and putting him on edge. I would also like to let you know that I will be informing Naruto-kun about his parents as well as his lineage since you haven't done so as of yet. I will not allow him to remain ignorant of the ones that brought him into this world, and since both of my previous containers were from his family, I will tell him what he needs to know if he is to truly grow strong and uphold the legacy of Konoha's Kiroi Senku and Akishi. Kyuubi said. Sarutobi paled as he realized the implications of what would happen. I have no idea how you would know such things, but I would like to ask that you reconsider telling Naruto such information at such a young age. The reason why I kept such knowledge away from him, since both of his parents had many enemies outside as well as inside of the village, with those inside being members of the Konoha Council. Plus, Iwa is still sore about their loss at the hands of Minato during the last Shinobi War, as well the blows that Kushina dealt them as well, and would attempt to kill Naruto solely because of the fact that he is his son. I already have enough attempts on his life within the village walls, and I don't want to have to deal with any attempts from outside as well. Kyuubi smirked. Do you really think I care about some grudge a few pissant human filth have against your Yondaime Hokage and Kushina? You are under the assumption that I will be telling the entire village of his heritage, but I will only inform Naruto-kun and make him realize he shouldn't tell anyone else without my permission. When I am confident that he can defend himself without having to rely on me to bail him out, then I will allow him to tell anyone that he wishes to, and when that happens I want him to receive everything that Minato and Kushina have left for him. Sarutobi started to protest. Don't you dare try to make up some poor excuse that they didn't leave anything behind, since I was sealed within Kushina before his birth, so I know what she wanted to leave for him as well as what Minato had planned as well. It is because she was my Jinchuriki before Naruto-kun that he has those whisker marks on his face, since they are a sign that he is the child of my Jinchuriki. I am also aware of the fact that he was supposed to be taken care of by your two students, Jiraiya and Tsunade, since they are in fact his godparents, with the slug Sannin also being a distant relative of his. You are quite lucky that I am preventing Naruto-kun from hearing what we are talking about right now, since with his new outlook on life he would be quite angry with you for keeping such information from him. You have made a lot of mistakes in how you chose to handle him, and I will make sure to correct some of them as I see fit. It is only through the fact that I respected both Mito and Kushina that I am being merciful upon this village by not plotting to turn my vessel against you so that he can wipe this village off the map. Although, I am at least tempted to point him in the direction of the Uchiha, since it is because of Madara Uchiha himself that all of my involvement with Konoha began in the first place, with his attempts to enslave me to his will with that control contract. What do you mean by that? Sarutobi asked, confused. Kyuubi shook her head then chuckled. I am surprised that despite the fact I was sealed within his wife, that Hashirama never explained to you why I had to be sealed inside of Mito in the first place after Madara first summoned me during their battle all of those years ago. Very well, I will inform you of a little bit of information. Despite what many believe, Madara did not die in the battle, and it only because of the knowledge I gained when I absorbed the DNA of the Sharingan into my being that I learned that there is another level of that accursed Dujutsu that is achieved when one sibling replaces his Mangekyo Sharingan with that of another. By doing this they remove the curse that causes them to eventually go blind and gives birth to another level called the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan that restored his eyesight as well as granting him a sort of immortality. That accursed Dujutsu is also the reason why Madara was the exact opposite of Hashirama, where his Mokuton was capable of calming us into a docile, Sedated-like state, the Sharingan was capable of ripping away our free will and enslaving a Biju to the user's will if their Dujutsu was advanced enough. As you should already know, the seal of a female Jinchuriki is greatly weakened when she is giving birth, and it was when Naruto-kun was born when that accursed man decided to appear before me once again, and with the use of the control contract seal he ripped me out of Kushina, returning me to the outside world again. It was while I was under his control once again that I attacked the village, and it was only the Yondaime fought against him and used another contract seal that was designed to negate the bond that a summoned had with their summoner and freed me from his control, but due to my rage and bloodlust I lashed out at the Yondaime Hokage, Kushina, and even Naruto-kun. The two protected him from me, and it wasn't until Shinigami-sama was summoned to seal me into him that I regained my higher sense of reasoning to realize what I had done. Sarutobi looked grim. So, you mean to tell me that all of this happened because of Madara Uchiha and his quest for vengeance against the Senju and Konoha, because of what happened all of those years ago? Kyuubi nodded. I find it hard to believe everything that you are saying, but your words are filling in many gaps that have been left unknown for many years now. Hashirama-sensei and Tobirama-sensei told me of the fate of the former Uchiha patriarch, but to hear that even after all of these years he has managed to escape death and still continue to live as has the power to control you or any other Biju. Many had always assumed that it was the current Uchiha clan that had something to do with your attack on the village, since some knew of the Sharingan's power to control a Biju, but to hear this instead is almost unbelievable. Madara must be over 100 years by now, but he was able to kill the Anbu and even my wife who were protecting Kushina and Naruto at the time, which is an incredible feat for one of his age. I can assure you that it was him, since I can easily recognize the taint of his chakra, and he is not as old since the Sharingan also seemed to give him eternal youth as well. It is because of their Kekkei Genkei that I hate the Uchiha with every fiber of my being, since they are granted far more power than what a mere human should be given, but luckily the power to control a Biju is not capable by all of them. As I analyzed the Sharingan, I came to understand that each one is a bit different from the other, caused by some sort of mutation in each one, so not every Uchiha is capable of the feats that Madara has performed. The Mangekyo Sharingan is a level that is unlocked by killing someone close to you, and the grief that you experience will cause it to advance to the next level, but the weakness of that level compensates for that by eventually rendering them blind. I removed this requirement from Naruto-kun's version of my Dujutsu, as I want him and his offspring to obtain that level through hard work instead of the need to kill someone close to them. I gave Naruto-kun all of these abilities since I believe Madara is still out there, and with his godlike power I wanted the kid to be able to match him if he ever runs into that man again. I shall not have my will stripped away from me for a third time, and once Naruto-kun has defeated Madara I can finally rest in peace until the time of our separation and return to my slumber until the next event that forces me to interfere in your human affairs. Kyuubi said. Sarutobi sighed as he massaged his temples before looking back at the Kitsune woman. Very well, I know the full reason why you are training Naruto-kun, since if Madara is still alive he is a threat to the safety of Konoha. However, I cannot act on the assumption that Madara will attack again anytime soon, and will only act when I am certain that he has surfaced again with the motive to attack Konoha. That is acceptable, and in the meantime I will train Naruto-kun so that he can eventually take his place as the living legacy of Minato and Kushina. I must cut our time short since his body can no longer support my possession of him. If you wish to speak more, you know how you can reach me, but don't start making too many demands of me or I will show you why I am the queen of the Biju. Kyuubi grinned. Hiruzen nodded and watched as Kyuubi was engulfed in smoke once again before it faded to reveal Naruto once again, except this time he appeared to be normal again since his arm and eye no longer transformed. The elderly Kage realized that Kyuubi was showing that Naruto could once again interact with the populace as he had before, and this caused him to grimace as he thought of the treatment of his surrogate grandson so far. Naruto-kun, I am glad that you are alright, and I would like to talk to you about some things that I have decided after talking with Kyuubi-san. Sarutobi said. Naruto looked cautious. What is it that you've decided, Gigi? Sarutobi smiled. First, as you already know, I have already signed you up for academy so that you can receive training to become a ninja for the village. However, I realize that because of the hatred of the village the instructors will most likely make it difficult for you, so I will have Neiko and her squad watch over you during that time to make reports to me of any wrongdoings, which I will punish accordingly. Second, I have decided to give you an additional teacher to help you alongside whatever Kyuubi-san has planned to teach you for the next 6 years. He is a former Anbu and will be able to help you develop in the use of your new dojutsu since he possesses a Sharingan, although he isn't an Uchiha by blood. Lastly, I will be moving you out of your apartment and into another home, but I have to make preparations before I can do so, and you will live there with your new teacher as well. There are some other things that I have to do as well, and I will let you know once things have been set in motion, since this is all on short notice and I have to deal with the council, since I am sure many felt that chakra burst earlier and will demand answers. Naruto frowned. You do know that if you tell them about what happened to me that they will try to get rid of me? I already told you that if anyone tries to hurt me, then I will fight back, because I won't be the village doormat any longer. Even if the village is still grieving over their loss, it's not very smart of them to make the person that could be their greatest protector into their greatest enemy. Sarutobi chuckled. You needn't worry about that, Naruto-kun. I have a plan that will keep the council off your back for the time being, and it's about time that I show the council who it is that really runs this village. I have allowed myself to be pushed around by them for far too long, since I have also been grieving and have not had the same wall of fire that made me Hokage in the first place. I promise you that things will become better for you, and while I can't assure you that everything will automatically turn out for the best, but with a little time you will finally gain the acceptance that you truly deserve. I want you to promise me that you will show the villagers a bit of mercy if they do decide to do something, since you will need them if you wish to become Hokage and take my place. Naruto grinned. Okay, I promise that I will give them a chance, but I will only give them one before I do what I need to do to protect myself. In the meantime, I'm going to train and become stronger so that one day I can become Hokage and show everyone who I really am. With that said, the boy left. Hiruzen laughed as he realized that despite the changes in Naruto's personality, he still had his dream to become Hokage. However, he knew that he would have to make a lot of changes if Naruto was to have a chance to properly grow as a shinobi, and he already had help in the forms of Kakashi and his still unbelievable aid of Kyuubi. The information that she told him made him realize that there also another problem that he was going to have to address, with the fact that Madara Uchiha was possibly still alive and roaming the elemental nations. He was already regarded as one of the most powerful ninja that ever came out of Konohagakure, and even Hiruzen himself doubted that he would be able to stand up to the power of such a foe if they were to ever meet on the battlefield. He may be known as the Kami no Shinobi, but he knew that his former sensei Hashirama could still run rings around him if he was still alive, with the man being able to go toe-to-toe with Madara even when he had the Kyuubi assisting him during their battle all those many years ago. As he told Kyuubi, he would have to wait until Madara decided to make an appearance once again, since it was still unclear if he was alive after his battle against Minato, since the Kitsune Vixen never mentioned what became of him, but he didn't get to his age by not expecting the unexpected. The elderly Cage pushed that though aside as he took a few puffs from his pipe as he thought of what he planned to tell the council when he asked them to meet. He knew that many would demands of him as to what happened to Naruto when the Kyuubi's chakra was felt, but he already had a plan to deal with that. He was going to make sure that Naruto would be able to get a bit of peace for a while, and he even considered recalling Jiraiya and Tsunade to perform their duties as his godparents. Jiraiya may have had his spy network to maintain as an excuse to leave, but Tsunade didn't have such an excuse, since as Kyuubi mentioned, Naruto was basically her family, since the Senju and Uzumaki had always been distant cousins and were brought closer together when Hashirama and Mito married all those years ago. The first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi was Tsunade's own grandmother, and with her ties to both clans, Tsunade was in fact his only remaining family, with Minato and Kushina dead. He knew that it was mostly his fault that Naruto didn't have anyone to look after him in the first place because of the actions that he took that night of Kyuubi's imprisonment that continued to add to his growing guilt over the years. If he had only done like his predecessors had done and kept Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki a secret, despite the fact Minato wanted his son to be seen a hero, Naruto would have lived a better life. Even after he revealed his status, if he had simply ordered at least Tsunade to return to watch over what was left of her family and made Jiraiya visit him whenever he came in to give him a report, things may have turned out for the better as well, since none of the villagers would try to take on either one of the remaining Sannin just to strike at Naruto. I have made so many mistakes over the years that always seem to come back to bite me in the ass when I least expect it. First, I failed with Orochimaru by showing so much favoritism to him, and when I chose Minato over him, his jealousy and rage gave birth to his sick desires and experiments. My faith that I could sway him back onto the right path, and even when I learned of what he was doing I couldn't even bring myself to stop him and allowed him to leave taking Anko with him. It has already been 2 years since her return and she is just as much an outcast as Naruto is with her peers can only see the evil of Orochimaru and refuse to believe that she was manipulated by him. I have even managed to ruin Naruto's life by not keeping quiet over what happened that night and find out that I still didn't fully know what happened if not for Kyuubi telling me. I may have been hailed as a genius during my years of service but I am still human but my latest mistakes almost cost the life of my surrogate grandson. If it wasn't for the Kyuubi he would not have survived that traumatic experience. Sarutobi thought and took another long drag from his pipe. From now on I'm going to do what I should have done from the start when I retook the Hokage's seat and continue the plans for this village that Minato discussed with me that he wanted to implement for the future of the village. Times have changed since the chaos of the 3 great shinobi wars and it is time the Konoha changed as well. Hiruzen put out his pipe and called for an Anbu to summon the council for an important meeting that would decide the future of Konoha. Quickly setting his mind to the task and slipped back into the persona that gave him the nickname, Kami no Shinobi, in the first place. He knew that many of the council that were so absorbed in his power would protest what he had in mind but he would make them understand that he was Hokage and this was his village to run as he saw necessary and if they didn't like it then, could pack their things up and leave. He didn't want to do such things but the recent actions of his villagers forced him to realize that he has become far too soft and has been allowing them to make him nothing more than a figurehead and that was something he could not allow. He refused to allow these greedy fools to trample upon the ideals that were instilled into him by the Shodem and Nidaime Hokage that was to ensure the bright future of Konoha. If anyone were to look into the eyes of the Sandaime Hokage they would see that a fire that had long since dimmed was roaring back to life all because a few ignorant villagers tried to take his surrogate grandson away from him. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, student of Hashirama Senju, the Shodem Hokage and Tobarama Senju, the Nidaime Hokage, and sensei to the legendary Sannin had once again regained his will of fire. Naruto walked back into his apartment and made his way to his bedroom before sitting down upon his moderately functional bed and stared at the wall. He hadn't realized how long he had been talking with the Hokage but the Kyuubi festival had already ended with it already being the following day. Only a few drunken villagers who were mostly civilians with only a few of the older genins, some chunins, and a couple of junins hanging around in the bars still partying even this early in the morning. A few he yelled out a couple of threats to him once they realized who he was but a quick use of Jinten. Nuasho had taken him away from them before any of them could start any trouble for him. He was tempted to kill them to set another example of them but had decided not simply because he didn't want to cause the Hokage any more trouble at the moment and was making an attempt to be patient with these ignorant fools and give them a chance to live even if he knew that they hadn't realized how close they were to death at his hands. Even Kyuubi had whispered to him that she was surprised that he hadn't cut them down for their insults but reasoned that he was merely biding his time and told him that she would turn him to a being that they would grow to fear as well as respect by the time she was done with him. The young Uzumaki couldn't resist the urge to shudder as a cold shiver had seemed to crawl up his spine when Kyuubi had spoken to him making him believe his training under her would be more like torture. Pushing the thought aside he glanced down at his newly restored left arm and by its appearance it looked like it should but the problem was he could still feel his arm was not the same. Even when he touched it with his opposite hand it felt like a normal human arm even if his mind was telling him that it was still his new demonic arm that was attached to his body. Getting up from the bed to make his way to the bathroom and taking a look in the mirror to get a look at his eye seeing that it was once again the same bright blue that he had seen every time but just knew it was different. This is the power of the Kitsune illusions that you are now capable of using thanks to your new dujutsu but I will have to train you in them. Since a Kitsune illusion is basically demon magic we are basically capable of warping the perception of reality to give an illusion true substance making them as real as we wish it to be. This is why your arm feels no different from your other one even if your mind tells you it isn't the same and will appear normal to anyone else around you as long as the illusion is maintained. Right now you are unable to perform the illusion so I will do it for you so that you don't cause a panic when walk through the village since you are still weak despite the changes I made and got lucky against those shinobi from last night. If they hadn't been so blinded by anger I am positive that those Junin you killed could have taken you down and even the Chunin would have given you trouble but that is something I will correct very soon. Kyuubi said. I can't wait to start training and becoming strong enough to take down anyone that thinks they can get rid of the Kyuubi brat, as those drunks earlier said. I will grow strong, and depending on how the village continues to treat me, I will become one of their greatest protectors or one of their worst nightmares. Naruto replied back, "Don't worry kid, by the time I am done with your training there won't be many that can stand up to your power, but like I've told you before, I don't want you always relying on the abilities of your arm and eye. In my many years I have come to see that each Kekkei Genkai that a human possess will always have an opposite that can neutralize it and make it useless to the user, which will put them at a disadvantage if that is all they have trained in. Many humans rely heavily on their Kekkei Genkai, and even worse, they base their entire fighting style around it, and that can be a great weakness when they can't use them to fight certain opponents." Kyuubi said, "I guess I understand what you are saying is that I shouldn't rely too much on my arm, eye, and my Jinten abilities all the time, because that would make me arrogant like the Hyuga and the Uchiha, since that's what Gigi has told me. I already know how arrogant those red-eyed bastards are, since they always try to jump me whenever they can, with them almost setting me on fire with a Kaden Jutsu last year if it wasn't for Neiko and her squad coming to my rescue." Naruto said with a mental growl. Kyuubi growled as well. "Yes, I am quite aware of that event last year, since it took quite a bit of my Yukai to heal those burns that were inflicted on you, but that also reminds me of something as well. Do you remember the 3 different sets of pipes that you saw when you first arrived in your mindscape?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I kinda forgot to ask you about them with everything else that was going on. Well, I might as well explain to you what each one represents. The blue pipes represents your normal human chakra that your body produces, while the larger red pipes represent my demon chakra, or Yukai as we call it, that is traveling through your body. However, according to how some Jinchuriki are made, they can sometimes are gifted with a fusion of their normal chakra and their Biju's Yukai, which is what happened with you and is represented by the purplish-white pipes that you saw. Yukai is far more potent than regular chakra, and if you were to use my Yukai alone to power a jutsu in the future, then that jutsu would be far stronger than it normally is and would require less Yukai than it would chakra to perform. Currently your body is able to produce its own form of Yukai, which is not as potent as pure Yukai but still stronger than human chakra. This is because of the fact that you are actually a Hanyu, that you are producing your own Yukai with mind being the catalyst." Kyuubi explained. "So, basically all Jinchuriki become Hanyus when they have a Biju sealed inside of them?" Naruto inquired. "No, there is actually more to you being a Hanyu than that. I have something that I wish to tell you, and it is about your parents, but I want you to listen to me before you go off on some sort of angst rant. Do you understand?" Kyuubi said. Naruto was hesitant at first, since this was something he had always wanted to know but at the same time was dreading as well. He had always asked the Sandaime who his parents but was never told, and figured that they had either abandoned him, died in the Kyuubi attack, or were traitors to Konoha. That was one of the reasons he came to that conclusion after witnessing how they had treated the purple-haired girl that the Sandaime had told him was once the apprentice to Orochimaru, the Habi Sanin. He had seen her on one of his outings with his Gigi and saw how they taunted her, calling her things like snake whore and traitor, saying that she was just like her master and would turn on Konoha first chance she got to sink her fangs into them. He could also tell that she hid her pain behind a mask, but where he would smile and laugh it off, she adopted a mask of bloodthirsty insanity and lashed out at those that tried to harm her. With the way he was treated as well, he figured that his parents had been even bigger traitors to Konoha than Orochimaru had been, but now he had a chance to at least learn of them and he wanted to know whether it was good or bad. "Hi, I understand," Naruto replied. Kyuubi smiled. "Very well, since the old monkey was too scared to tell you, since he feared you would have ninja from other villages after your life if your heritage was ever made known to the public. What you are unaware of is that you are actually my 3rd Jinchuriki, with my 2 previous hosts also being of Uzumaki just like you are. This is because only an Uzumaki has the power to successfully hold back my power due to the gifts of their Kekkei Genkai, which includes longevity, higher physical endurance, larger than average chakra reserves, and in some special cases the ability to regenerate body parts, which includes controlling their age by regenerating their cells, or the ability to create chakra chains. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki, the Aki-shi, and she was the last survivor of what was once known as Uzushiogakure that was destroyed during the Shinobi Wars. My first container was Mito Uzumaki, and she was the wife to your Shodem Hokage, Hashirama Senju, with the Senju clan being distant relatives of the Uzumaki after a branch family of the Uzumaki broke off and renamed themselves the Senju. The Uzumaki were a feared clan because of their fuinjutsu, kenjutsu, and their kekai genkei, with many seeking to destroy them or gain favor with them. Their kekai genkei was also what made them perfect jinchuriki, since allowing any biju from the gobi to myself to be easily contained with the proper fuinjutsu. Uzu held an alliance with Konohagakure and their ally, Sanagakure, with it being strengthened with the union of Mito and Hashirama, which also strengthened the bond between the Senju and Uzumaki clans. So, there is a chance that I have some family left out in the world, but why was I left an orphan unless they didn't know about me? Naruto replied. That could be true, but I do believe that there is more to it than just not knowing of your existence. Unfortunately, Uzu no longer exist. With the fall of Uzushio came when Iwagakure, Kumogakure, and Mizugakure formed an alliance to eliminate Uzu. Despite the small size of the village, their fuinjutsu and the abilities of their special group of swordsmen known as the Uzushio no Shinobigatana Shichinen Shu, 7 ninja swordsmen of the Whirling Tides, allowed them to hold them off for a time while they waited for reinforcement from Konohagakure and Sanagakure, but before their allies could reach them, the village fell with any possible survivors scattering across the lands. From what I came to learn, the ruins of Uzushio still remain, since despite its people being gone, the treasures of Uzushio are still protected by very powerful fuinjutsu that have yet to be countered. Kushina came to Konoha before its fall, since Mito was nearing the end of her life and was made my second Jinchuriki, then returned to Uzushio afterwards. With the fall of Uzushio, she returned to Konoha and attended the academy to become a kunoichi, where she met your father and would later marry him. Your father is also the very same man that sacrificed his life to seal me back inside of you after I was released during your birth, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Naruto was shocked. You mean to tell me that my father is the Yondaime Hokage and these ignorant bakas are trying to kill the son of the very same man that they praise as the greatest Hokage of all time? Hearing stuff like this makes me wish that I wasn't born a human, if this was how stupid I could be if I wasn't your Jinchuriki. Kyuubi giggled. That is exactly why I am telling you all of this, because you're not exactly human anymore. This is a very little known fact about a female Jinchuriki, but according to how closely bonded with their biju when they have a child, certain traits are passed on to their kit. Although Mito and Kushina were my first 2 Jinchuriki, neither really bothered to use my power in the first place and only really kept me contained so that I couldn't cause any harm. Mito wasn't really that much of a fighter since she was more of fuinjutsu specialist, so she kept my power restrained as much as possible. Kushina was a bit different since she did use my power from time to time but didn't interact with me that much except to demand chakra from whenever she needed it, which wasn't very often since she was quite a powerful kunoichi. I would even go as far as saying that she was as strong as the Yondaime, maybe even stronger, but I can't be certain. Also, Kushina was the one that taught him the fuinjutsu that he used in the designing of the Shikifu Jin and Hake no Fuin Shiki that is used to contain me and you. Despite not realizing it, Kushina had been using her chakra chains to bind me to her, which had the added side effect of forming a stronger bond between the two of us, so this is why when you were born you had picked up enough traits from me that you were born as a Hanyu. Also, you may also realize that because of your heritage you are practically royalty in this pissant village, since you are related to the Shodem, Nidame, and Yondaime Hokage by blood. You even look like a chibi version of Minato Namikaze, so you can see why I find it amusing that humans believe themselves superior to demons. Naruto resisted the urge to facepalm. It's official, the villagers of Konoha are complete bakas if they can't see the connection between me and father. Hell, his face is practically staring at them every day from the Hokage monument, and I'm sure there are some people still alive in the village that grew up with him, so when they look at me they should be able to connect the dots. Right now I don't know whether I should respect my father for sacrificing his life to seal you or angry with him for condemning me to this life of suffering. On top of that, Gigi knew all of this and wouldn't tell me, so I should be angry with him as well. Well, I already know why the old monkey didn't want to tell you or anyone else about your true lineage. Minato and Kushina became quite famous in the Third Great Shinobi War, especially with the fact that Minato was the main reason why Konoha defeated Iwa with his use of his famous Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique, which caused both of them to gain many enemies. He reasoned that if he knew that you were the son of the Konoha no Kuroi Senku and the Aki Shi, they would be willing to go to war with Konoha just for the chance to kill you, and with the weakened condition of Konoha after my attack they wouldn't have been able to survive. Plus, until I made you smarter you were just as much of a baka as these pissant humans and would probably have told everyone you met who your parents were if he had told you, and would have caused a lot of trouble, especially since the villagers wouldn't have believed you and claimed you were trying to slander the name of the Yondaime. They most likely realize that you look like him but think that it's some sort of trick played by me in order to spite Minato and make them hesitant to attack you since you so much like their hero. Kyuubi pointed out. You know, you are really making it hard for me to resist the urge to go out and just start killing a few villagers just to relieve some stress right now. I may understand the reasons why my life has been made into a living hell, but that doesn't make me any less angry about it, nor does that mean I'm going to change my views on how I'm going to deal with the villagers. I have the legacy of many great heroes of Konoha to uphold, and I can't do that by becoming a walk doormat just so they can feel good about themselves for putting the demon brat in his place. I won't let anything hold me back from becoming the strongest person to have ever walked the elemental nations, and I will cut down anyone that dares to stand in my path. Naruto said with conviction. Kyuubi took a bit of pride in Naruto after his bold declaration. You will go very far in this world, Naruto-kun, and I will help you along the way. This is one of the ways that I can atone for all the suffering you and your family have suffered through my inability to resist being controlled by Madara. When I feel you have proven yourself enough to me, I will tell you of the real reason why I attacked and prepare you to face off against Madara. That old monkey doubted what I said about that foul Uchiha, but I know he is still out there, plotting and waiting for another opportunity to strike. I can't wait to see the shock on his face when he sees that his coveted Sharingan has been combined with the Byakugan and being used by my kid against him. I am more than just the queen of the Biju and haven't existed for this long without coming up with new ways to use my power over the years, for you will learn what it means to feel the wrath of the Kyuubi no Yuko. Naruto-kun, I will help you to reach your goals, but for now I want you to get some rest. There are a few more adjustments that I would like to make to your body, and I require you to rest for me to do so. If you want, we can talk in your mindscape if you wish, and the sooner I get done the sooner I can start training you on how to use your new gifts properly. Kyuubi said. Yeah, I am kinda tired after everything that has happened, so I should get some sleep. I guess I'll talk to you in a little while, Kyuubi-chan. Naruto thought back. Kyuubi gave a sound of confirmation before closing the mental link between her and Naruto. The blonde Namikaze Uzumaki heir returned to his room to gather his sleeping garments, to which the Kyuubi decided would have to change since the Gamma-themed clothing was rather offensive to her after her battle with Gamabunta all of those years ago. Maybe she would give him the summoning contract for the Kitsune when she felt he was worthy enough of such an honor, and knew that her created clan would be grateful since he would be their first summoner if she did. After bathing, Naruto quickly climbed into bed to allow his body to rest, while his mind once again brought him to the Kyuubi's cage where they would continue to converse. Meanwhile, at the same time Naruto was talking with Kyuubi, a meeting of great importance was taking place in the Hokage Tower. The entire council had been gathered at the request of the Sandaime Hokage, with the civilians griping about being bothered at such a time, while the remaining Shinobi Council and the Advisory Council already aware of why they were summoned after having felt the brief release of Kyuubi's chakra earlier. The council room was divided into 4 sections, with 3 being meant for the council members to be seated. On the left side of the room was a semicircular table that was meant for the civilian council, while the right side was a semicircular section meant for the shinobi clan heads, while at the top was a table meant for the Hokage and his advisory council to be seated, while a platform was set in the center for anyone meeting the council to stand. The civilian council was made up of the head of civilian clans such as the Haruno and top merchants of the village, while the shinobi council made up of the major and minor shinobi clans of the village such as the Aburame, Akamichi, Hyuga, Inazuka, Kurama, Yamanaka, and Uchiha clans. The advisory council was made up of Danzo, leader of the disbanded Nei Anbu unit, and Hiruzen's former teammates from his genin days, Homura and Kaharu, while the Sandaime sat in the center of them to preside over them. All were in attendance with the exception of the Hokage, which made many of the civilians angry, stating that the old cage was wasting their time, which made many of the clan heads frown at the lack of respect from their counterparts, with even the advisory council disgusted by their arrogance. It was only a few moments later that Hiruzen entered the room followed by Neiko and her Enbu squadron who took up positions in each corner of the room. Everyone focused their attention on the elderly Kage as he took his seat and fixed his gaze upon them. Since everyone is here, I will tell you of the reason why I have called for this meeting in regards to recent actions against Naruto Uzumaki. Sarutobi said with many frowning at the mention of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Hokage-sama, you mean to tell me that you got me out of my bed this early in the morning and demanded a meeting just because that stupid little brat caused trouble around the village again? Sayuki Haruno said with annoyance. Shut your mouth, you pink-haired howler monkey. If the Hokage demands a meeting, then it must be of some importance to the village, and it is your duty as a member of the council to attend even if you're not really needed. Just think that just because you're a member of the civilian council and the head of a civilian clan that you carry a lot of sway round here, since this is a shinobi village. Sume Inuzuka snapped. How dare you speak to me like that, you filthy mongrel. You shinobi think you're so much better than us, but if it weren't for us civilians, then you wouldn't have the food you eat or the weapons that you use to fight with. If anything, this village would be better off if it wasn't run by someone that isn't a bloodthirsty killer. Sayuki screeched back in reply, causing many to wince at her banshee cry. Sume snarled. I ought to rip out your tongue for that one, and don't think my clan actually need any of you around. We only buy what we need from shinobi-run business, since all of their stuff is obviously of higher quality, and I know that a lot of the other clans do too. Plus, you have the nerve to think that someone like you could run this village better than a ninja, and what would you do the moment an enemy village decided to attack us? You would run and hide like the cowardly banshee that you are. Why we ninja would have to fight to save your sorry hide. A lot of you civilians sit over there smug in your little bit of power that you are granted by being a part of this council and think you have the right to order us shinobi around any way you feel like. Civilians like you are more of a security risk than anything, since you know a few of the village secrets that could be revealed to another village if any of them appealed to your greed. You have the nerve to accuse the civilians of being the ones to sell out the village, when it you ninja that are the ones that turn on the village and go rogue all of the time. We don't even know that much about the village security, since you ninja always kick us out any of the important meetings. You ninja think highly of yourselves as well, thinking that just because we can't fight like you guys that we are any less dangerous. If you took away all of that, none of you would be any different than the rest of us, but you're just a bunch of freaks just like that stupid brat. Daisuke Masaki bellowed. Daisuke is head of the Konoha Merchant Guild and one of the main reasons Naruto can't purchase quality goods. Sume glared at the portly man and was about to begin a tirade on him as well when the room was flooded with killing intent, causing the civilians in the room to pale with fear while the shinobi all broke out in a cold sweat. The Sandame was glaring at the members of his council as he held the killing intent at a moderate level to make sure that he had everyone's attention as he spoke. I did not call this meeting to have to listen to any of your complaining about such trivial matters. I have said this before, that both the ninja and the civilians of this village are required to keep Konoha running effectively. I have other matters to talk about, and I demand your attention, or I will send each of you to Ibiki for a bit and see if he can knock some of that arrogance out of you if you continue to act like children. Sarutobi said as he cut off the killing intent. Kaharu was the first to speak after she had recovered. Hiruzen, why did you call for a meeting at such a time to discuss the Uzumaki child? I will get to the point of this meeting right now. I am sure that many of you felt the presence of the Kyuubi's chakra a few hours ago, and I will tell you why that happened before you start making false accusations such the Yondaimi's seal breaking and releasing the Kyuubi. Yesterday during the Kyuubi festival, a mob consisting of civilians and ninja broke into the apartment of Naruto Uzumaki and chased after him with the intent to cause him harm. Naruto-kun was able to outrun them for a time and was attempting to take refuge in the forest outside of the village walls, but was cornered in an alley where they proceeded to attack Naruto-kun like they have in previous attempts. However, this time they were able to take it further and gravely injure him by stabbing him in his right eye and removing his left arm. Sarutobi said. Many of the Kyuubi haters couldn't hide the smug expressions, and hearing that the demon boy had been seriously injured and knowing of his desire to become a shinobi, this setback would ensure that he never became one. With the threat of him becoming powerful again removed, they knew that it would only be a matter of time before they could completely remove his dark and evil taint from their pure and noble village. Hiruzen saw this along with those that supported Naruto, and it made them sick that these were the sort of people that they had to live with. However, Hiruzen would take a bit of satisfaction since in the next few moments he would spin a story of what happened earlier that would burst their bubbles. Hokage-sama, I am assuming that since you are telling us this that Naruto-kun is currently residing in the hospital after such a traumatic event? Hiyashi inquired. Actually, he is currently at home due to what happened after he was injured. Due to the damage he sustained, the chakra of the Kyuubi was released in order to heal Naruto-kun and at the same time gave the boy the means to lash out at the mob that attacked him. I arrived with the Anbu just in time to witness Naruto-kun defend himself from another attempt on his life and kill a few members of the mob. Sarutobi replied. If he actually killed people, that just proves that he's a demon, just like we tried to tell you he is, and should be executed. It's quite clear to everyone here that the demon is regaining his power and will eventually try to destroy Konoha once again. Another civilian council member by the name of Kaide yelled. So you're telling me that I should execute a 6-year-old child for the simple fact that he defended himself? It still amazes me that you all praise the Yondaime for his sacrifice in sealing the Kyuubi into Naruto-kun but at the same time have so little faith in the seal. Naruto-kun is not the first Jinchuriki ever created, and like all that came before him, he is merely the prison that keeps the Biju trapped inside of their body. That is why they are given the label of human sacrifice, since it is because idiots like yourselves that know little of the power of Fuinjutsu always demanding the death of those that carry such burdens. I had a chance to talk to the Kyuubi during my conversation with Naruto-kun, and I learned a few interesting things about the Shikifu Jin that the Yondaime used on Naruto-kun. Despite my earlier understandings of the seal, I learned even more when I found out that if Naruto-kun was to die, then the Kyuubi would be taken to the afterlife with him but would return. This is because a Biju cannot truly die and will always be a part of this world because they are quite simply forces of nature. Sarutobi grimaced for a moment. Another fact I learned that if Naruto-kun really wanted to, he could release the Kyuubi back into the village if he so chose to, since the seal is powered by his will to survive, and if he did release Kyuubi he would die in the process, but so would we, since Kyuubi wouldn't hesitate to wipe the village off the map. Hiruzen said, causing many to pale when they realized what Naruto was capable of. Hokage-sama, I get the feeling that there is more to this little story that you have to tell us. Shikaku said in a lazy tone. You are quite observant, Shikaku-san. I also came to learn that the Kyuubi is actually the queen of the Biju, since she is of female gender, and she has been quite angry with the treatment Naruto-kun has received at the hands of this village. Because of the attack on Naruto that cost him his eye and arm, she bestowed a few gifts upon him in the form of a new arm as well a new eye that contains a very powerful dujutsu and also a certain Kekai Genkei that I had long since thought had gone extinct. The Kekai Genkei is known as Jinten, which grants the user high-speed movement that far surpasses the Shunshin Jutsu and may be on par with the Hiraishin used by the Yondaime, and was last heard of being used by a clan that died out during the First Great War, but since Kyuubi has been around for quite some time, she was able to grant Naruto-kun this ability. Due to his special status, Naruto-kun is in the position to become a very powerful shinobi in our ranks, but from the mindset that I witness after this latest attack, he has shown signs that he may leave the village for good. Sarutobi said while mentally smirking, knowing that Naruto really didn't want to leave the village but he wanted to see how they took the news. Hokage-sama, you can't be serious. If the boy has such unique abilities, then he must remain in the village and use his new gifts to ensure the safety of Konoha. Homura said, with many civilians agreeing with him. I see that you are forgetting that Naruto-kun is still a civilian and can leave the village at any time he chooses, since he is not a ninja and therefore is not required to remain in Konoha. There isn't a single law that states that a civilian can be bound to the village they live in whether they are in possession of a Kekai Genkei or not, and if he chose to leave I wouldn't allow anyone to stop him. Sarutobi smirked. Besides, you're always demanding his banishment or execution, so I thought that the idea of him leaving would have been most appealing to you. Surely you can convince him to remain a part of the village. We did agree to your request to allow him to attend the academy for a chance to become a ninja, and you have a good relationship with him, so he would listen to you if you were to ask him to. Daisuke said. Sarutobi chuckled. That may have been true in the past, but because of all of the suffering he has been forced to endure over the last few years, he has begun to trust me even less and has even accused me of allowing the villagers to harm him in an attempt to instill a sense of loyalty in him. I can see where he gets this idea from, since each time he has attacked my Anbu always managed to come to his aid at seemingly just the right moment, and since any time the mob is to be punished you go behind my back to make sure they are merely held in jail for a few days and released with the promise to not try anything again. He has seen some of the same faces as before harm him and made me agree that in order for him to even consider remaining in Konoha that the remaining members of the mob are to be executed like I had originally stated when I passed that decree 6 years ago, and that it be made public. This is an outrage. How dare that demon brat make such a demand of you and expect you to go through with such an act? This only proves that he is really the Kyuubi, and this is his form of revenge for all of the times we have tried to show him what his place is. I don't even believe what you are saying about that demon really being a woman, since it's clear that it has consumed the boy's soul and taken his place, and using your fondness for him against you. Fugaku bellowed as he rose from his seat. Sarutobi frowned. I see you are also trying to question my judgment of the matter, but I will only say this once. You may be the head of the Uchiha clan, but if necessary I will take your acts of defiance as a sign of treason and have you removed from this council and replaced with someone else more level-headed from your clan. After everything I was told from the Kyuubi, why would she feel the need to lie, since if she wanted to she could be free from the seal and destroy this village in a heartbeat, and there would be nothing that we could do to stop it. Naruto-kun made a solid point when he said that it was not his fault that such a burden was placed upon him by the Yondaime, but instead of honoring his wish to treat him as a hero for his great service you treat him as if he were a traitor and do everything you can to break him. Many of you have become swallowed up by your feelings of anger and loss but failed to realize that Naruto has lost far more than any of you have. The elderly Kage narrowed his eyes in anger. He lost both of his parents that night and was made an orphan then, forced to give up any chance at being normal because he is the epitome of a sacrifice. You would continue to torment him in order to make yourselves seem righteous while thinking you are honoring the wish of the Yondaime, and at the same time push Naruto-kun closer to the edge of his sanity. You would actually dare to fool yourselves to believe that my successor would sacrifice the life of an innocent child just in order to give you the ability to kill the demon, and I pity each one of you for simplistic way of thinking. All that I can say is that this time you may have pushed him too far, and if he does decide to unleash the Kyuubi, then, Kami, have mercy on us all. Everyone present began to think over what was said so far, with some coming to terms with fact that they had the wrong ideas about Naruto. However, some still believed that the Kyuubi was merely playing on the kindness of the Sandaime Hokage, and this latest attack made the demon realize how close to death it was. They rationalized that all this was merely a ruse in order to get them to lower their guard and give the boy his space so that he could continue to regain his power, so that one day he could break the Yondaime's seal and once again attempt to destroy Konoha. Those that couldn't let go of their hatred for Naruto made even more plans to bring about the death of Naruto, while those that supported him were thinking of new ways to help him. Having dismissed the council, Hiruzen could see that his words had changed the views of some, but there were many that still hated Naruto for his burden and would not stop trying to harm his surrogate grandson. He knew this would lead to serious headaches for him, since Naruto made it quite clear that he would do everything in his power to make them understand he wouldn't allow them to walk over him anymore. He just hoped he could find a way to keep as many of his villagers alive once Naruto decided to unleash his wrath upon all that threatened him. He also wondered if he should also try to make Jiraiya or Tsunade the Godem Hokage when he sent out his request for their immediate return, because he was getting far too to be dealing with this shit. THSTA all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.